Chapter 601. All of a sudden the hall fell silent. Yi Xian's request, apart from the Dao realm treasure, was actually not too much. However, everyone was still a little uncomfortable, because what Yi Xian was doing was kind of extortion. At this moment Yi Xian said, "If you feel that it's difficult, it's fine. You can just send someone else. After all, going to God Nation is equivalent to risking your life. Seniors, I am also very afraid of death." At this moment the Demon King suddenly said, "City Lord Yi, God Nation is invading. Everyone should unite." "Your method?" Yi Xian looked at the Demon King. "I heard that the demon race also has a super genius and he is on the low rank. I think he is not weak. Why don't we send him? If he is willing to go, I am willing to personally donate 2 creation realm swords." Hearing this, the Demon King's face suddenly darkened. He is not good at concealment. Yi Xian smiled. "Excuses. All excuses. You are just afraid that something bad will happen to him. What? The life of your demon race genius is a life, but my life is not a life." The Demon King looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. Yi Xian was not afraid. Anyway, this Demon King had targeted him several times. There was no need for him to give him face. At this moment Spiritual Master Chu softly sighed. "Little friend Yi, other things are fine. As for the Dao realm treasure, this..." Yi Xian suddenly said, "Doesn't the Order Alliance have a Dao realm treasure?" "Oh right, it is called the Heavenly God Armor. I think it is very good." Not far away the Star Lord glanced at Yi Xian. "What are you dreaming about in broad daylight?" Tang Yan and the others also shook their heads. This Heavenly God Armor was a treasure on the Interstellar Bounty Board, and it was ranked 6th. Although it was not as good as Yi Xian's treasure, it was still a treasure. Yi Xian was really thinking too much about this treasure. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Star Lord, how about I make a deal with you?" Planet Lord looked at Yi Xian, not doing it. He was very wary of Yi Xian at the moment. Yi Xian's shamelessness was unprecedented and would never be matched in the future. Yi Xian suddenly said, "How about I go get the body of your lawful alliance's Gu Tatian?" Hearing this, the Star Lord squinted his eyes. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Are you doing it or not? If you do, then give me the treasure." The Star Lord said indifferently, "You don't have that ability." Yi Xian said, "You don't have to worry about that. Just tell me if you're willing or not." After a moment of silence the Star Lord said, "Bring it back and I'll give you the treasure." Yi Xian laughed and said, "Do you think I'm stupid? What if you don't acknowledge it after I get it back?" As he spoke he gazed at Daoist Chu. "Senior Chu, I can give up on the Dao realm treasure, but I do want those 20 creation realm swords. If you can satisfy this small request of mine, then I'll investigate the strength of the Divine Kingdom even if I have to risk my life. But if you have any difficulties, then just pretend that I never said anything." The surroundings fell silent. Everyone finally understood what was going on. It wasn't impossible for Yi Xian to risk his life, but he had to give them benefits. Meanwhile, the Southern Sect Martial Master suddenly said, "Then get him 20 swords. After all, the journey to the Divine Kingdom is extremely dangerous, and it can't be without benefits." Yi Xian glanced at the Southern Sect Martial Master. Amongst the 5 of them, only the Southern Sect Martial Master would occasionally speak up for him. As for Daoist Chu, he couldn't see through him. Daoist Chu nodded slightly. "Then I'll get you 20 swords." As soon as he finished speaking he waved his right hand, and 4 swords suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. The 4 swords were all at the creation realm, and every single one of them emitted the aura of an old sword Dao. They weren't ordinary creation realm swords. At this moment the Southern Sect Martial Master suddenly said, "I've collected some over the years. I'll give them to you." As soon as he finished speaking he waved his right hand and 4 swords appeared in front of Yi Xian. They were all at the creation realm as well. Soon the Demon King also took out 4 swords. Only the Star Lord was left. Yi Xian looked at the Star Lord and the latter didn't hesitate. He directly pointed with his finger and 4 swords floated in front of Yi Xian. 20 swords. Yi Xian sighed in his heart. These old monsters were extraordinarily rich. At this moment, Daoist Chu pointed with his finger and a fist-sized stone fell in front of Yi Xian. This is a space teleportation stone. If you encounter any danger you can crush this stone and it will teleport you here in an instant. Yi Xian nodded and then put away the 20 sword domain teleportation stones. Following that he cupped his fists at everyone. "Seniors, I'm going into seclusion for 3 days. After 3 days I'll head to the kingdom of God. However, I'll go there quietly and I hope that you can keep this a secret. Daoist Chu nodded. Of course. Yi Xian didn't say anything else and turned to leave. After Yi Xian left, the nearby Star Lord suddenly said, "This person is a bandit and his greed is insatiable. Are you really going to indulge him like this?" Daoist Chu looked at the Star Lord. Then why don't we let the geniuses of the Order Alliance go? The Star Lord frowned slightly and didn't speak. Daoist Chu shook his head. Star Lord, I know about the grudge between the Order Alliance and him, but you have to understand the situation now. Yi Xian is on the same boat as us. If he stands on our side, it'll be beneficial for us. The Southern Sect's martial master nodded. Brother Chu's words make sense. This Yi Xian's combat strength isn't bad, and he's an expert in assassination. You have to know that if we go to war with the kingdom of God, if the younger generation doesn't have a few to shoulder the burden, our people will definitely be massacred by the kingdom of God's geniuses. At that time it'll be very disadvantageous for us. And with Yi Xian around, the pressure on our younger generation will be much less. The Star Lord was silent. Tang Yan also said, it's indeed dangerous for him to go to the kingdom of God. It's understandable that he wants such a little benefit. Our top priority now is to fight against the God race. As for the grudge between him and the Order Alliance, once this matter is over, you can do whatever you want. At this time Spiritual Master Chu looked at Chu Kuang, who was not far away. Pass down my order to your God Dao soldier. Don't provoke this person. This person has a bad temper. If you find him, he'll stab a hole in you regardless of the consequences. Chu Kuang said indifferently, my God Dao soldier has a bad temper too. Spiritual Master Chu looked straight at Chu Kuang. Commander Chu, you have to understand one thing. He once killed more than 30 Dao realm powerhouses. Also, there's a problem with his bloodline. After he kills someone, he can't control himself. You better tell your people not to provoke him. Otherwise, the old man won't want to come out and clean up your mess. After saying that, he turned and left. At the side, the Southern Sect's martial master also looked at Chu Kuang. Don't provoke this hot-tempered little guy. When he goes crazy, it's really a headache. After saying that, he also left. The Demon King looked at Chu Kuang. I hope that you, the God Dao Lord, can suppress his arrogance. After saying that, he got up and disappeared. Soon, only the Star Lord and Chu Kuang were left in the hall. Chu Kuang looked at the Star Lord. The Star Lord shook his head. Don't provoke this person for now. Chu Kuang said in a deep voice, is this person really that monstrous? The Star Lord said softly, the scary thing about him isn't his strength, but that he doesn't care about his life. If he wants to fight, he will fight. He won't consider the consequences and will fight with his life. He's just a fool. Don't provoke him for now. After saying that, he turned and disappeared. Chu Kuang. After Yi Xian left the heaven-trampling hall, he found a quiet place. Then he took out a creation realm sword and stabbed it into his abdomen. Devour. Very quickly, streams of pure energy spread out from his body. Chapter 602. Devour. Yi Xian sat cross-legged in the prison pagoda. As he devoured the manifestation realm sword, his body began to tremble. Not far away from Yi Xian was a Yu. Yu sized up Yi Xian with curiosity in her eyes. This was the first time she had seen this cultivation method of devouring swords. About 2 hours later, Yi Xian picked up another sword and stabbed it into his abdomen. Boom. A powerful aura suddenly spread out from his body. Yu ignored Yi Xian and walked to the side to look at the Emperor Hound. The Emperor Hound was also cultivating. Ever since the Emperor Hound obtained the little white fellow's gift, it had been in seclusion. Its aura was gradually growing stronger every day. Yu sized up the Emperor Hound and said softly, this fellow will probably recover to its peak soon. No, that little fellow's purple aura is changing this fellow's bloodline. Is it evolving? Evolving. Since ancient times, many demon beasts' achievements depended on their bloodline. To a large extent, bloodline determined the demon beast's achievements. It could be said that bloodline was very important to demon beast. Of course, there were exceptions. It was evolution. It was absolutely impossible to break through one's bloodline and evolve to a higher level without great fortuitous encounters. But now this Emperor Hound was showing signs of evolution. What kind of existence was that little white fellow? Yu frowned deeply. At this moment she could not help but think if that little fellow had given her a bit of purple aura, Would she have evolved herself? Dao laws could naturally evolve as well. It was still a pity. Ayu shook her head. If she had been a little more thick-skinned back then, perhaps she would have mostly recovered by now. Ayu turned and left. She returned to the 5th floor. At this moment Xiao Ling was watering a spirit tree. Yu walked over to take a look. Xiao Ling turned and grinned at Ayu before continuing to water the tree. As she watched, Ayu's expression suddenly became solemn. Because she realized that Xiao Ling had become somewhat different. Was he going to evolve? Yu looked at Xiao Ling not far away and did not speak for a long time. After a long time Ayu said softly, I have to be more thick-skinned in the future. 3 days later Yi Xian, who was sitting cross-legged in the World Prison Pagoda, suddenly stood up. The moment he stood up, a powerful aura suddenly emanated from his body. The spell defensive state. In 3 days he had devoured a total of 15 Creation Realm swords. After absorbing the Creation Realm he finally broke through from the Dharma Realm to the Dharma Defensive Realm. In the field Yi Xian closed his eyes slightly. He opened his palm. The Executing Heaven sword was floating quietly in his palm. The spell defensive state. After a while Yi Xian shook his head. He was only at the spell defensive realm, yet he had to devour 15 swords at the Creation Realm. What would he do in the future? Moreover, the further one went, the less useful a Blessed Realm sword would be. Where was he going to find so many Dao Realm swords to devour? This was a bottomless pit. At this moment, Ayu suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. How do you feel? Yi Xian said, it feels different from before. Moreover, I noticed that my divine sense seems to have become much stronger. Ayu nodded. You've improved greatly in all aspects now. However, your current strength is still unable to resist the Dao laws of the 6th floor. Yi Xian asked. Then what should we do? Ayu spoke indifferently. Don't you have me? Yi Xian hurriedly said, yes, yes. With Miss Yu here it's naturally not a problem. Ayu said, I'm just afraid that it has fallen into someone else's hands. Yi Xian asked, what if it has fallen into someone else's hands? Ayu glanced at Yi Xian. If it's forcefully subdued then we'll take it back. If it follows us willingly then we'll trick it back. Aren't you very good at deceiving people? Yi Xian was speechless. Ayu said, go quickly. I want to take a nap. Don't bother me if there's nothing important. Otherwise I'll beat you up. She intended to leave once she finished speaking. Meanwhile Yi Xian suddenly said, Miss Yu, can I enter the 7th floor after I find the Dao laws of the 6th floor? The 7th floor. He hadn't forgotten that there was a box and an unparalleled martial technique on the 7th floor. An unparalleled martial technique. If he were to learn the boundless sword, then he would probably be able to kill a Starlord with a single strike of his sword with his current strength. Ayu fell silent for a short moment before she said, if I join forces with the Dao laws of the 6th floor, then I'll be able to allow you to enter the 7th floor. Of course, you'll be in danger because we don't have the Dao laws of the 7th floor right now. So, it'll be a problem if you try to force your way through. Yi Xian laughed bitterly. Miss Yu, why can't the pagoda itself enter the 7th floor? Ayu spoke indifferently, because it hasn't fully awakened yet. You should feel fortunate about that. She turned around and left once she finished speaking. A short while later, Yi Xian left the pagoda and snuck towards the Divine Kingdom. He had to search for the Dao laws. He needed to find as many Dao laws as he could. Firstly, it was for the sake of the pagoda's stability, and secondly, it was to improve his strength. Only by being strong could he protect himself. He didn't want his fate to be in the hands of another. Not long after Yi Xian left the Great Wall, the Star-Lord suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian's brows knit together slightly. Is there something you need? The Star-Lord gazed at Yi Xian. Can you really bring back Star-Lord Ancient's corpse? Yi Xian spoke indifferently. It's up to you whether you believe me or not. The Star-Lord flicked his finger and a spatial ring descended in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian glanced at it and there was only a single piece of armor within it. A Dao Realm Divine Armor. The Star-Lord looked Yi Xian in the eyes. If you try to play any tricks then you'll definitely regret it. I guarantee that. He turned around and left once he finished speaking. Yi Xian put the spatial ring away and then placed the divine armor within the pagoda. Miss Yu, is there anything wrong with this thing? On the 5th floor, Yu sized up the divine armor in front of her. What do you want this piece of trash for? Yi Xian. At this moment the divine armor in front of Yu suddenly trembled, and the next moment, a black light blasted directly out of Yu. Yu raised her hand and slapped it. Boom. The black light was directly shattered, and then Yu grabbed the divine armor and gave it a vicious beating. Xian shook his head. Was this divine armor stupid? It actually provoked Yu. Wasn't it looking for a beating? After a long time the divine armor became obedient. Yu said, "There's nothing wrong with this lousy thing, it just needs a beating." With that said, she threw the divine armor out. The God of Heaven armor was directly tossed to the first floor. After arriving at the first floor, the God of Heaven armor noticed the spirit trees that little Ling had planted. In the next moment, it flew directly before a spirit tree, and then it transformed into a ray of black light that enveloped the spirit tree. In an instant the spirit tree and spirit fruit were completely devoured by it. It didn't take long for it to want to devour a second spirit tree, but Xiao Ling suddenly appeared in front of it. Xiao Ling clenched her fists tightly, and her face was livid with rage. Her icy cold gaze sent chills down one's spine. It didn't take long for the divine armor to be chased all over the pagoda by Xiao Ling. It wasn't that it didn't resist, but when Xiao Ling took out the sword at the top of the pagoda, it completely gave up resisting. Outside the pagoda, Xian shook his head. Needless to say, no one could save this divine armor now. Recollecting his thoughts, Xian kept moving forward. His target was the kingdom of God. A while later, Xian arrived in front of Gu Taishan's corpse. He stole a glance around and found nothing. Then he flew in front of Gu Taishan and saw a pitch-black chain on Gu Taishan's body. The chain was pitch black, but there was a blood-red line in the middle. Xian was about to attack when a voice suddenly rang out. "You can't break this chain." Xian's heart skipped a beat. Who was talking? He scanned the surroundings and suddenly looked at Gu Taishan. "You're still alive?" Gu Taishan suddenly looked up and Xian realized that Gu Taishan's eyes had disappeared, leaving behind two pitch-black holes. Gu Taishan shook his head. "I died 1,000 years ago." Xian calmed himself down. "Senior, are you a zombie?" Gu Taishan. Xian looked at Gu Taishan warily. It was better to be on guard against others. A moment later, Gu Taishan shook his head. "It's just a wisp of my divine soul." Then he turned to Xian. "Are you from the sword sect?" Xian hesitated and was about to speak when Gu Taishan suddenly said, "You're a sword saint at such a young age and you're not bad." Xian shook his head. "You flatter me, senior." Gu Taishan asked softly, "Is the God Nation going to make a comeback?" Xian nodded. Gu Taishan fell silent for a moment, then asked, "Is there anyone in the Order Alliance who is titled as an emperor?" "Titled as an emperor?" Xian frowned. "What do you mean? An expert above the Dao validation state?" Gu Taishan shook his head. "Above the Dao validation state is the Dao mastery state, and above that is the Tendo state. Is there anyone in the Order Alliance who is titled as an emperor?" Xian thought for a moment and shook his head. "I don't think so." He guessed that the Star Lord and the others were at the Tendo state at most. Gu Taishan said in a deep voice, "We don't even have one emperor. How can we fight against the God Nation?" Xian shook his head. "Senior, let me take you away." Gu Taishan said softly, "Young man, I have a presumptuous request. I wonder if you can fulfill it." Xian hesitated for a moment and said, "Please tell me, senior." Gu Taishan nodded. "I've been trapped here for 1,000 years. My body has been hung here, exposed to the sun, the rain, and the wind. I don't want to disappear from this world. Moreover, the God Nation is making a comeback. Who can stop them without me? So my young friend, you must help me." Xian lowered his head. "Senior, I don't know how to resurrect." Gu Taishan said, "Tendo, you don't need to resurrect. Just give me your body." A wisp of black light suddenly disappeared into Xian's brow. Possession. Chapter 603. When Wu Taishan's soul entered Xian's mind, he was going to destroy Xian's soul completely and take over Xian's body. In his opinion, although Xian was a sword saint, his cultivation level was too low. There was no way that Xian's soul could compete with his. However, when he entered Xian's mind, an illusory Xiaota suddenly appeared in front of him. Wu Taishan's expression changed drastically when he saw the illusory Xiaota. "Why do you have this tower?" "Possession." Yi Xian never thought that Wu Tatian would possess someone else's body. As a matter of fact, a true overlord would never possess someone else's body. Possessing someone else's body meant that one was useless. Moreover, Wu Taishan's soul was only a wisp. Even if the possession was successful, it would be useless. He would at most live a little longer. After all, a damaged soul could not be repaired. What Yi Xian didn't expect was that Wu Tatian didn't have the demeanor of a powerhouse at all. Inside Yi Xian's body, Wu Tatian was enveloped by the prison tower and could not move at all. Wu Tatian said in a deep voice, "Who are you? Why do you have this tower?" Yi Xian didn't waste any time. He opened his palm and the soul-suppressing sword appeared in his hand. The next second, the soul-suppressing sword sunk into Yi Xian's forehead. Inside the tower, the soul-suppressing sword floated above Wu Taishan's head and began to absorb his soul. Wu Tatian yelled, "How dare you!" He wanted to resist, but he was suppressed by the prison tower. There was no way he could resist. Wu Tatian was starting to panic. A moment later, Wu Tatian said in a deep voice, "Mister, if you let me go, I can give you a lot of benefits." Xiao Hun suddenly said, "Young master, if I absorb his soul, I can read his memories." Yi Xian said, "Yes." Xiao Hun was overjoyed. "Thank you, young master." The soul-suppressing sword began to vibrate violently. Soon, Gu Taishan's soul became more and more illusory. Gu Tatian said fiercely, "Do you want to fight to the death?" At this time, the soul-suppressing sword suddenly fell straight down. Boom. In an instant, Gu Taishan's soul was absorbed without any resistance. The soul-suppressing sword had a natural suppressive effect on souls, and with the help of the prison pagoda, how could Gu Tatian resist it? At this time, Soul suddenly said excitedly, "Young lord, this person's soul is very strong. I might be able to advance." "Advancement?" Yi Xian said right away. "Race to Dao realm?" Little Soul said, "It's possible." Yi Xian smiled and said, "That's a good thing." Little Soul said, "I want to digest this person's soul, so I can't serve master during this period." Yi Xian smiled. "There's no hurry. Take your time to absorb it." Little Soul grunted and began to focus on absorbing Gu Taishan's soul. Yi Xian looked at Gu Taishan's corpse and shook his head. So even an expert of this level was afraid of death. But then again, the longer one lived, the more afraid one was of death. Without further ado, Yi Xian waved his right hand and put away Gu Taishan's corpse. Then he turned and ran. However, no one showed up. Yi Xian continued toward the divine nation. He didn't dare to use the sword kinesis flight or travel through space, so he only arrived at a castle after 6 hours. The castle was called the Tumu Castle. It was huge and looked like a crouching beast from a distance. The castle's gates were not closed and people often came and went. Yi Xian snuck into the castle. There weren't many people in the castle and most of them were soldiers. Moreover, these soldiers' auras were extremely strong, a sign that they were not weak. Yi Xian kept moving forward. Suddenly, a group of cavalrymen appeared at the end of the street in the distance. The cavalrymen galloped toward the gates, their leader shouting, "Close the gates! Close the gates!" Yi Xian frowned. He looked at the gates and saw that the gates had suddenly closed. Soon a huge light screen enveloped the entire castle. Not only that, but a beam of light suddenly shot down from the sky and swept across the city. Yi Xian's face darkened when he saw this. "Is it looking for me?" The beam of light was about to hit him. Yi Xian didn't dare to let it hit him and immediately retreated. However, the beam of light was sweeping across the entire area and there was nowhere for him to retreat to. Seeing that there was nowhere to retreat, Yi Xian stopped and let the beam of light hit him. At this moment he had no choice but to believe in the chaotic energy. Soon the beam of light swept past him and nothing happened. Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief. However, the beam of light suddenly turned around and landed right where he was. Yi Xian's expression changed. Something's wrong. Suddenly, a dozen powerful auras surged toward him from all directions. Yi Xian didn't dare act carelessly and he turned around and fled. At this moment he didn't conceal himself any longer. He immediately utilized the spatial Dao laws and sword control technique. In practically an instant he'd appeared outside the castle. However, the beam of light was still on him. Yi Xian was just about to flee again when a strand of saber energy tore through the sky. It was so swift that it instantly arrived in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian didn't dare act carelessly and raised his sword. The saber energy was instantly slashed into pieces. Meanwhile, a woman suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian, and Yi Xian was stunned when he saw her. The woman was stunned as well. Yi Xian naturally knew her. It was that woman who'd chased him and Wuxia all the way to the Great Wall. However, she wasn't riding a horse this time. The woman sized Yi Xian up and said, "Why have you come to my divine kingdom?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "To play." The woman's brows knit together slightly. "Shameless swordsman. You're definitely here to obtain military intelligence." Yi Xian shook his head. "I'm not." The woman said, "You are. I'll chop you to death today." As soon as she finished speaking, her figure suddenly vanished like a ghost. A dazzling strand of saber energy flashed. It was fast. That was Yi Xian's first thought. This woman's saber technique was even faster than his flying sword. However, he wasn't afraid at all. Yi Xian raised his hand and swung his sword. Plang! A clear and melodious sound of something breaking resounded, and then the woman returned to where she stood earlier while the saber in her hand had been split into two. She glanced at her saber and then she gazed at Yi Xian. "Shameless swordsman, do you dare to put down that sword and fight me fairly?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "How about this? I won't use my sword and you don't use your saber as well. We'll use our hands, all right?" The woman thought for a moment and said, "All right." As soon as she finished speaking, she put her broken saber away. Yi Xian put his sword away as well. Meanwhile, the woman suddenly charged forward. Her speed was too swift, so everywhere she passed, numerous seemingly material afterimages were left behind. As soon as she vanished, Yi Xian vanished as well. It didn't take long for them to grow closer to each other. When they were just 1.5 m away from each other, a saber had suddenly appeared in the woman's hand. At practically the exact same moment, a sword had appeared in Yi Xian's hand. Both of them attacked at the same time. Bang! An explosion suddenly resounded and then both of them instantly retreated by 300 m. The woman glanced at the saber in her hand. At this moment, it had shattered into pieces as well. She gazed at Yi Xian, put her saber away and said, "I'm serious this time." Yi Xian nodded. "All right." As soon as she finished speaking, the woman suddenly appeared in front of him. Her speed was so fast that Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. In the next moment, countless blade auras directly drowned Yi Xian. Chi-chi-chi-chi-chi-chi. Numerous sounds of slashing that caused one's scalp to go numb resounded incessantly. Every single slashing sound would cause Yi Xian to retreat explosively while the woman continued slashing madly, slashing after slash, and she didn't give Yi Xian the slightest chance to catch his breath. But gradually, flying swords appeared all around the woman. These flying swords appeared without warning, and with the appearance of these flying swords, the woman's attacks slowed down. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly charged forward and slashed down with his sword. How terrifying was the power of the executing heaven sword! Yi Xian's sword easily tore apart the space in front of him. On the other hand, the woman's expression changed slightly when she sensed Yi Xian's attack, and then she swiftly pressed her palms together. Eternal moment. As soon as she finished speaking, a ray of light suddenly shot out from the center of her palm. Bang! A world-shaking explosion suddenly resounded, and then both Yi Xian and the woman were pushed back repeatedly. Both of them moved over 1 kilometer back. As soon as Yi Xian stopped moving, his clothes had split apart and blood sprayed from within them. There were no less than 30 marks on his body. Meanwhile, the woman's entire body was covered in a few dozen marks as well, and her clothes were dyed red with blood. Yi Xian had a rather solemn expression on his face. If he hadn't held the executing heaven sword just now, then he would have probably suffered a huge loss. This woman was so powerful. The woman gazed at Yi Xian. "You would have died a long time ago if you didn't possess that sword." Yi Xian smiled. "Is that so?" As soon as he finished speaking, he put the executing heaven sword away. In the next moment, 2 flying swords suddenly appeared around the woman. The woman reacted extremely quickly and she raised her saber and slashed. Bang! The 2 swords were instantly blasted flying. But right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of her and he stabbed with his sword. This time, the sword in Yi Xian's hand was only an ordinary sword. The woman used 2 fingers to clamp down lightly on Yi Xian's sword. But right at this instant, Yi Xian suddenly released his grip and raised his knee. The woman's reaction was extremely swift, and she raised her knee as well. At the instant Yi Xian raised his knee. Bang! Both of them moved apart as soon as they came into contact. But they'd only just moved apart when the two flying swords suddenly shot towards the woman. At the same time Yi Xian suddenly vanished. Bang! Numerous explosions resounded incessantly. During this entire process, the woman was pushed back incessantly, and she moved almost 3 kilometers back in the end. Yi Xian stopped moving. At this moment there were 3 scars on the woman's face. Blood seeped out incessantly. Yi Xian gazed at the woman and grinned. "Am I strong?" The woman wiped off the blood on her face and said, "Shameless swordsman. You've succeeded in infuriating me." As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly raised her head and roared furiously, "The heavens are my saber." As soon as she finished speaking, a saber silently condensed into form in the sky. As soon as the saber appeared, a strand of monstrous pressure suddenly appeared in the sky, and this pressure locked onto Yi Xian. A moment later the woman pointed furiously at Yi Xian. "Chop him to death." Yi Xian was speechless. P.S. Today is the 1st, so everyone has a huge amount of free monthly tickets. Please get monthly tickets. Please get monthly tickets. To explain, the Divine Kingdom isn't related to the Divine Race at all. The Divine Race is a very young race, and the Divine Kingdom has only appeared recently. Please get monthly tickets. Chapter 604. As soon as the woman finished speaking, the saber above Yi Xian's head suddenly slashed down fiercely. The saber seemed like it was going to split the sky in half, and it was extremely shocking. At this moment Yi Xian's expression was rather solemn, because the might of this saber was extremely powerful. Yi Xian didn't use his sword. He opened his palm and clenched it lightly. In an instant the space above his head started to strangely reorganize and shrink. The woman's saber suddenly slowed down, and it was getting slower and slower. By the time it arrived above Yi Xian's head, the saber had stopped. However, its power was still there because the space above Yi Xian's head was trembling violently. However, the saber gradually calmed down and disappeared. Nearby, the woman blinked in a daze. "That's it?" Yi Xian waved his hand. He looked calm on the surface, but his heart was extremely solemn. Even though he'd used the Space Dao Law to erase the saber, the power contained within the saber was too great, so it wasn't easy for him. In the distance, the woman suddenly said, "How did you do that?" Yi Xian looked at the woman. "Girl, I didn't want to kill you because you're cute. Otherwise, you would have been dead a long time ago. Understand?" The woman's face was expressionless. "Shameless swordsman, you must have used some sort of treasure again." At this point she paused slightly and said, "Can I have a look?" Yi Xian was speechless. When she saw Yi Xian remain silent, the woman grunted coldly. "Swordsman, let me give you a piece of advice. Do you want to hear it?" Yi Xian said, "Tell me about it." The woman said seriously, "If you keep using external objects, you'll lose yourself. That's not good for your sword Dao cultivation. Why don't you give all those treasures to me? I'm not afraid of losing myself, really." Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Why is this woman so powerful? The woman asked again. "What do you think? I'm doing this for your own good." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "I can give them to you, but I have a small request." The woman blinked. "There are even requirements." Yi Xian nodded. "It's just a small request. If you're willing to help me, I'll give you all the treasures." The woman thought for a moment and said, "What request?" "First of all, I will not betray the divine race." Yi Xian said seriously, "I don't want you to betray the divine race. My request is very simple. Look at me, I'm quite handsome, right?" The woman blinked. Yi Xian sighed softly. "Sigh, but you don't know that I'm still single. If anyone becomes my wife, won't all my treasures belong to her?" The woman wiped off the blood on the corner of her mouth and said, "My master said that when a man speaks flowery words to you, then it's most likely because he wants to sleep with you. You wouldn't be thinking of sleeping with me, right?" Yi Xian was speechless. The woman suddenly said, "Swordsman, come with me to see my master. As long as she agrees, I'll be your wife." Yi Xian was expressionless. "I'm going to see your master. Let me ask you, can I still live after seeing her?" After saying that, he turned around and left. This woman's tricks were really deep. Going to see her master? He was probably tired of living. The woman suddenly stood in front of Yi Xian. She clenched her fists in anger, but soon she loosened her fists like a deflated balloon. "Swordsman, you broke my saber. Can you pay me back?" Xian said. "You want to kill me?" The woman spread her hands and was somewhat puzzled. "I want to kill you. What does that have to do with you compensating me with your saber?" Xian's face darkened. "Please, you want to kill me, but you want me to compensate you with my saber? Why don't you go to heaven?" The woman looked at Xian. "Will you compensate me or not?" Xian shook his head. "No." The woman nodded slightly. She opened her palm and a golden talisman suddenly soared into the sky, disappearing into the horizon. Xian was a little curious. "What's that?" The woman said calmly, "Call for help." Xian. At this moment more than 10 powerful auras suddenly attacked from the distant sky. Seeing this scene, Xian's expression changed. He turned around and ran. At this moment, more than 10 people landed beside the woman. One of the men in the lead said in a deep voice, "Junior sister Swijing, who was that?" The woman named Swijing looked into the distance. "A swordsman from the west." The man frowned slightly. "Is he very strong?" Swijing nodded. The man said, "Chase him." Swijing shook her head. "Don't chase him." Everyone looked at Swijing. Swijing lowered her head slightly. "He stole my saber." Everyone. At the end of the distant sky, Xian stopped. At this moment the beam of light had also disappeared. Xian sat cross-legged on the ground, his expression dark. He had snuck into the God Nation. How did the other party discover him? Did the God Nation discover him on its own, or did someone tip him off? Someone had tipped him off. Who could it be? The Order Alliance. The first person that came to Xian's mind was the Order Alliance. The Order Alliance wanted him dead the most. After a moment of silence, Xian shook his head and stopped thinking about this question. Then he began to recuperate. Although he did not fight to the death with that woman, he had still expended a lot of energy, especially when he had activated the spatial Dao Law. This Dao Law was too terrifying. Every time he activated it, it consumed a lot of energy. Although it consumed a lot of energy, this Dao Law was still very powerful. 2 hours later, Xian had more or less recovered. At this moment, Little Soul's voice suddenly sounded. "Young Lord, I am about to break through." Xian was stunned and then hurriedly said, "You have reached the Dao realm." Little Soul's voice was a little excited. "Yes." "Young Lord, when can we go kill Thiar Crown martial artists? If I absorb more of these martial artists, I will definitely be able to continue breaking through." Xian's face darkened. "Calm down first. Kill Thiar Crown martial artists?" What was this Little Soul thinking? At this moment Little Soul said, "Young Lord, I might need 3 days. In these 3 days, I hope that Young Lord can use your sword intent to help me." Xian asked, "Can the sword intent help you?" Little Soul said, "Of course. Young Lord's sword intent is special. Moreover, Young Lord and I are connected mentally. Young Lord will be of great help to me." Xian smiled. "All right. I will go find a place. I will accompany you in breaking through." Little Soul said, "Thank you, Young Lord." Xian smiled slightly. "What are you thanking me for?" With that, he turned and disappeared on the spot. At the Great Wall. At this moment there were many martial artists on the Great Wall. These martial artists had come from various desolate domains. These martial artists were excited. They were not the least bit afraid. This was because, according to the Lawful Order Alliance and the other factions, God Nation was not that strong. After all, God Nation had once invaded but was stopped at God Burial Plains by Gu Tatin alone. Every time they thought of this, they became fearless. They even hoped that God Nation would attack sooner. War could kill, but it could also lead to riches. The rewards offered by the Lawful Order Alliance and the other factions were very tempting. Moreover, God Nation would definitely offer many benefits. How much would they gain if they conquered God Nation? But now there was still no movement from God Nation. Therefore some martial artists on the Great Wall could not wait any longer. They wanted to fight. How did many martial artists? He suggested striking first to gain the upper hand and counterattack the Divine Kingdom. However, Perfected Master Chu and the others did not agree. Wait. They were waiting for Xian to bring them information about God Nation's situation. However, within the Great Wall more and more people sought to fight. Perfected Master Chu and the others did not suppress them by force because doing so would affect their morale. On the contrary, it was a good thing that these people were so eager to fight. Because of this, there were countless people on the Great Wall shouting for a counterattack on the Divine Kingdom every day. Xian found a secluded cave in a mountain range. He glanced at the surroundings and then entered the prison pagoda. To help Little Soul improve. If Little Soul could attain the Dao realm, then his combat strength would definitely improve greatly. After all, Little Soul's current abilities were extremely terrifying. Little Soul floated silently in front of Xian. Young Lord, I need a lot of sword intent. Xian nodded. In the next moment, countless sword intents appeared and then they surged towards Soul. It didn't take long for Little Soul to start absorbing Xian's sword intent madly. Not far away, Xiaoling sat beside the Emperor Hound. She leaned against it and occasionally took a bite of the fruit in her hand. Xiaoling glanced at Xian and Little Soul, then looked at the right corner. There a piece of armor was trembling. The heavenly god armor. This armor had been in a terrible state recently because it had been chased by Xiaoling every single day. Moreover, Xiaoling had no intention of letting it go. After a while, Xiaoling patted her stomach. He was full. So she stood up and charged towards the heavenly god armor with her sword. The heavenly god armor. God Nation. How big was God Nation? No one knew. All they knew was that the entire eastern wasteland world was God Nation's territory. The Divine Capital. The Divine Capital was the center of power in God Nation. It was also the most prosperous city in God Nation. There were a total of 18 divine veins in this city. The Divine Capital was not particularly big, but the entire city was filled with an ancient aura. In the center of the city, there was a statue of a woman that was hundreds of meters tall. The woman had her hands behind her back and looked at the starry sky coldly. This person was the creator of God Nation, Wu Anning. Rumor had it that there were hundreds of big and small countries in the eastern wasteland world. It was the most chaotic of the 4 wastelands. Not only that, there were many large and small sects and forces in the eastern wasteland world. It could be said that the eastern wasteland world was extremely complicated and chaotic. This situation continued until Wu Anning appeared. This legendary woman had once said, "I want the world to be at peace." Therefore, she unified the entire eastern wasteland world in less than 5 years. Not only that, God Nation was the only country in the chaotic universe where imperial power was greater than anything else. This was because in the God Nation, all sects and families had to follow the orders of the Divine Lord. No one dared to disobey an imperial edict. It was worth mentioning that the position of Divine Lord in God Nation was not hereditary. It was abdicated. The next God Lord of a divine kingdom was personally chosen by the previous God Lord. The chosen person had to be the best in terms of strength, talent, and intelligence. This was because if they were not outstanding enough, they would not be able to convince the public. It was precisely for this reason that every God Lord in the divine kingdom was a monster among monsters. In front of the divine palace, a little girl looked at Wu Anning's statue in the distance quietly. There was a sword at her waist. At this moment, an elder appeared behind the little girl. The elder bowed slightly. "Your Highness, the 8 kings and 26 saints have arrived." The little girl nodded slightly and turned to leave. Chapter 605. 3 days later, inside the World Prison Pagoda. Inside the pagoda, Soul-Suppressing Sword was still frantically devouring Xian's sword intent. And at this moment Xian's face was extremely pale, somewhat frightening. Because for the past 3 days he had been frantically giving sword intent to Soul-Suppressing Sword every day, and this consumption was too great. At this moment Soul-Suppressing Sword suddenly trembled violently, and a powerful aura suddenly rippled out. Boom. Xian was jolted back again, and when he stopped he looked at Soul-Suppressing Sword in front of him. At this time an excited voice suddenly sounded in Xian's mind. "Young master, I broke through." Xian hurriedly said, "Dao realm." Little Soul said, "Yes." As it spoke, it floated in front of Xian. Xian gripped the sword and in an instant, a powerful force surged toward him like a tide. Xian was startled. "Little Soul, this is?" Little Soul said, "Soul power." "Soul power?" Xian asked. "Soul power?" Little Soul said, "Yes, this is soul power. In the future, young master can borrow my soul power at any time. This soul power can greatly strengthen young master's soul, and has many benefits for young master. For example, if young master uses the soul power when activating the flying sword, it can make the flying sword faster. In addition, the strength of the soul power can also let young master resist some soul attacks. Of course, the most important thing is that I have become more powerful. Xian asked with a smile. How powerful? Little soul said, I can now easily kill Dao realm powerhouses unless their souls are especially powerful, otherwise I can easily separate their souls from their bodies. In addition, when young master uses me to fight in the future, I can also affect the enemy's soul. This is called soul snatching. In any case, it is very powerful. Xian said with a smile. Good thing. Little soul said, many thanks for young master's nurturing. Xian shook his head slightly. Little guy, you are too polite. These past few years you have helped a lot. Moreover, there is no need for thanks between us. Soul fell silent for a moment and then said, all right. Xian smiled and sat down to absorb the divinity crystal. Roughly 2 hours later, Xian left the world prison pagoda and headed towards the divine nation. He was very curious about the divine nation because the divine nation was too mysterious to them. Xian snuck back to the castle again. After making some inquiries, he left the castle and headed for the divine nation's divine capital. God's capital was the center of power in the God nation. This time he was not only going to see the strength of the God nation, but he was also going to search for the Dao law. After entering the border of the divine nation, Xian found that the spirit qi in the divine nation was much more abundant than in the other deserted worlds. Moreover, there were many spirit veins between the mountains and some of them were even celestial-grade spirit veins. In the other deserted worlds, the wild spirit veins had basically all been plundered. But here there were so many wild spirit veins and no one was fighting for them. Xian was a little tempted, but he didn't do it. Because this was definitely not normal. There must be some strong cultivators guarding these spirit veins. And his main task now was to search for the Dao law. Therefore Xian didn't have any ideas about the spirit veins. Just like that, 3 days later, Xian finally arrived at the divine nation's divine capital. Xian stood in front of the divine capital's gate. The divine capital before him wasn't as big as he had imagined. In fact, it was a little ancient. However, the entire city had a heavy aura. Precipitation. This city must have experienced the precipitation of countless years to have this kind of charm. Just as Xian was about to sneak into the city, a woman suddenly appeared in front of Xian. Xian was speechless. From her appearance, the woman looked to be in her 20s. Her hair was tied into a ponytail and she wore a very clean white robe. She held a folding fan in her hand, looking elegant yet heroic. The woman sized up Xian and smiled. Are you Xian? Xian nodded with a calm expression. The woman smiled. Hello, let's get to know each other. I'm Nangongwan, a small strategist by His Majesty's side. Xian thought about it and said, Hello, I'm Xian, the city lord of Divine Martial City. Nangongwan smiled. There's no need to be on guard, City Lord Yi. Our divine nation is hospitable, and we won't do anything unfriendly to our guests. Of course, the prerequisite is that the guest is friendly as well. Xian asked in a low voice, How did you find me? Nangongwan smiled. Many ways. Xian sighed. It seemed like he had underestimated this divine nation. Meanwhile, Nangongwan suddenly said, City Lord Yi, I heard that you wanted to see the strength of our divine nation. So, His Majesty sent me to receive you and show you around a few important places in our divine nation. Xian thought about it and said, You're so friendly. I'm a little panicked. Nangongwan smiled. City Lord Yi, you must be joking. City Lord Yi dared to come to our divine nation by yourself, and that's enough to show your courage. If you're willing, you can come with me to see some places in our divine nation. If you're unwilling, you can leave on your own and we won't stop you. Xian asked, Why? Nangongwan blinked. No reason. Xian fell silent for a moment and then he nodded. Then I'll be troubling you, Miss Nangong. Nangongwan smiled. Her smile was like a blooming flower and it was very beautiful. Xian said seriously, Miss Nangong is really beautiful when you smile. Nangongwan smiled. Thank you for your praise, City Lord Yi. Please follow me. After she finished speaking, she gestured for him to follow, and then she walked towards the center of the city. Xian followed her. On the street, Xian noticed that there were cavalrymen passing by from time to time, and they all emanated a murderous aura. very strong. And when these cavalrymen passed by him and Nangongwan, they would stop, and then they would slightly bow to Nangongwan, and Nangongwan would also return the bow. On the way, Yi Xian asked, Miss Nangong's identity seems to be unusual. Nangongwan smiled. She's closer to His Majesty, you know. Yi Xian nodded and then he asked, Miss Nangong, are there many geniuses in the divine nation? Nangongwan nodded, yes. Yi Xian said, I'd like to hear the details. Nangongwan said, in our divine nation, there is a list called the Divine Martial List. There are 10 people on the list, and these 10 people are the most powerful of our divine nation's younger generation. Yi Xian asked, I remember that there is a girl with a saber. She's quite young, what's her ranking? Nangongwan looked at Yi Xian, a girl with a saber? Yi Xian nodded, and then he described the young woman on the horse that he'd fought earlier. After a short while, Nangongwan smiled and said, Young master, you should be talking about Sujing. She's from the Saber sect and she isn't on the Divine Martial List. Yi Xian frowned slightly. She isn't on the Divine Martial List? Why? Nangongwan said, because she wasn't able to defeat the person ranked 10th on the Divine Martial List. Yi Xian's expression instantly became solemn when he heard this. That woman actually isn't qualified to be on the Divine Martial List with her strength. Is the woman in front of me trying to scare me? As if she knew what Yi Xian was thinking, Nangongwan smiled and said, There is a fellow on the Divine Martial List in the city, and I'll bring young Master Yi to experience him later. Yi Xian nodded, all right. In next to no time, Nangongwan brought Yi Xian to an academy. The Oceanic Academy. Nangongwan and Yi Xian had just arrived before the academy's entrance when a middle-aged man came out to greet them. The middle-aged man bowed slightly to Nangongwan and said, So it states Scholar Nangong. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you. Nangongwan returned the bow and said, Scholar Su, you're too kind. I've come this time to bring City Governor Yi to tour the Oceanic Academy. I wonder if it's convenient for your academy now? Scholar Su smiled and said, Of course it's convenient. Please. Nangongwan looked at Yi Xian and said, City Governor Yi, please. As soon as she finished speaking, she led Yi Xian towards the academy. There was a Xiaodao in front of them and the Xiaodao wound its way up a mountain. The three of them walked silently like this. All along the way, students that passed by would bow to Scholar Su and Nangongwan. On the way, Nangongwan suddenly asked, Young Master Yi, is there an academy in your world? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, I don't think there is. Nangongwan looked at Yi Xian and said, Do you only focus on cultivation over there? Yi Xian nodded and said, Yes. Nangongwan shook her head and said, How can that be? If a person doesn't study and only focuses on cultivation, then even if he possesses formidable strength, he will still be mediocre in terms of spirit and thinking. Yi Xian smiled and said, Miss Nangong, you might have misunderstood. We don't have many academies over there, but it's not that we don't study. It's just that we don't pay as much attention to it as you do here. When he was in Qingqing, he had also studied and learned to read when he was very young. Nangongwan nodded and said, If my divine nation goes to your world, we will definitely open more academies so that more people can not only cultivate but also study. Yi Xian smiled and said, Miss Nangong, you make the invasion sound so righteous? Nangongwan said, Young Master Yi, your world is already lagging behind and it's lagging behind a lot. It's not a bad thing for us to go there. Yi Xian said, Many people will die. Nangongwan said, People will definitely die in war, but it will be a blessing for generations to come. Yi Xian looked at Nangongwan and said, You're not a fish, so how can you know the happiness of a fish? Perhaps peace is more important to your side. Nangongwan smiled and said, We've received news that many people on your side are preparing to take the initiative to attack my divine nation. Yi Xian frowned and said, Take the initiative to attack? Nangongwan smiled and said, You see, you don't like peace. If the Order Alliance on your side was strong enough, I think they would have already brought their people to attack my divine nation. She shook her head and then said softly, The chaotic universe is very, very big. There are countless forces in the 4 desolate worlds and these forces fight all year round. Do you know how many people die every year? If my divine nation unifies the chaotic universe, then everyone can live in peace and compete with each other. Isn't that better? Yi Xian said in a low voice, You are invading. Nangongwan smiled and said, But what if your side attacks first? Yi Xian fell silent for a moment and said, then kill them. Remember, you must kill the leader of the Order Alliance first. I've been unhappy with them for a long time. Nan Gongwan was speechless. Chapter 606. Yi Xian wasn't lying. There were two reasons why he came to the Great Wall. First, he had to come. If he didn't come, the Star Lord and the others would definitely target him and Shenwu City. Second, he knew the principle of, when the nest is overturned, no eggs remain intact. If the Order Alliance, the Tang clan and the monster race were all destroyed, Shenwu City would definitely be destroyed. Under such circumstances, he decisively chose to resist the divine race. But if the Order Alliance and the others were greedy and wanted to attack the divine race, he would absolutely not allow it. He wouldn't let the people of Shenwu City be bullied, but he wouldn't take the initiative to invade others either. Yi Xian's words stunned Nan Gongwan. Obviously, she didn't expect Yi Xian to say that. After a while, Nan Gongwan chuckled, "Young Master Yi, you're a little special." Yi Xian was about to speak, but at this moment, they heard someone reading aloud not far from them. Yi Xian and Nan Gongwan looked over. Not far away, there were 30 students reading aloud with scrolls in their hands. At this moment, Scholar Su suddenly said, "State Scholar Nangong, this is City Lord Yi from the West. My students want to ask him some questions. Is it possible?" Nan Gongwan smiled and said, "Scholar Su, you have to ask City Lord Yi himself." Scholar Su looked at Yi Xian and said, "I wonder if City Lord Yi can enlighten me?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "I don't dare to enlighten you. Just treat it as a discussion." Scholar Su nodded and looked not far away. There, a woman suddenly walked over. The woman was about 18 or 19 years old. She had delicate features and was very beautiful. She was wearing a long black dress and was holding a thick book in her arms. The woman came in front of Yi Xian and Nan Gongwan and bowed to Nan Gongwan. "Greetings, State Scholar Nangong." Nan Gongwan smiled and said, "No need to be so polite." The woman nodded and looked at Yi Xian and said, "City Lord Yi, nice to meet you. I'm Fang Wenqing, Songhai Academy's chief scholar. Please enlighten me, State Scholar Yi." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Just call me Yi Xian." Fang Wenqing nodded slightly. "Young Master Yi, what do you think of the relationship between our divine kingdom and your side?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Hostile." Fang Wenqing said, "What young Master Yi sees is only hostility, but what I see is hope, your hope. There are 3 deserted worlds on your side. There are countless forces and billions of lives in these 3 deserted worlds. The environment they are living in right now can only be described as abyss of suffering." Yi Xian asked, "Why?" Fang Wenqing said, "Although there are internal conflicts in our theocracy, there has never been a large-scale war. As for the commoners, as long as they were willing, they could study and cultivate. As for our god nation, we have an imperial examination system. As long as you have genuine talent, you can enter the imperial court and serve the country." At this point, she bowed slightly to Nan Gongwan and said, "Nangong Kingdom Scholar was just a girl from an ordinary family, but through her own hard work she became a kingdom scholar respected by countless people." Nan Gongwan smiled and said nothing. Fang Wenqing looked at Yi Xian and said, "If our god nation enters your side, it will indeed harm the interests of some of the major forces on your side, but it can benefit billions of people. Not only this generation but for generations to come." Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then he looked not far away and saw a student holding a bird cage. Yi Xian walked in front of the student and said with a smile, "Can you lend it to me for a moment?" The student glanced at Yi Xian and then handed the bird cage to Yi Xian. "Lord Yi, this is my beloved thing. Please don't hurt it." Yi Xian smiled and said, "I won't." After saying that, he turned to look at Fang Wenqing and said, "Miss Fang, do you see this bird cage?" In his opinion, he raised this bird and fed it with delicacies every day, so it must be very happy. But is that really the case? As he spoke, he opened the bird cage. In the next moment, the bird flew out and disappeared into the distance in the blink of an eye. The student next to Yi Xian's expression changed. He grabbed the bird with his right hand and directly pulled it back. He glared fiercely at Yi Xian and then put the bird back into the bird cage. The bird kept jumping around in the bird cage. Yi Xian looked at Fang Wenqing and said, "Miss Fang, do you see that? You think that you started the war for our good, but in my opinion it's a bit like you want to be a whore and build a chastity memorial. Moreover, Miss Fong, war is often a kind of plunder. If you go there, can you guarantee that the forces on your side won't go crazy and plunder? Or even enslave the people there? If you really want to help them, why don't you communicate with us? As long as the people on our side understand your side, I believe that many people will definitely be willing to come over to your side. Why do you have to start a war? After saying that, he shook his head and smiled. In the end, war is cruel. No matter what the reason is, it's cruel. Fong Wenqing shook her head and said, cruelty is only temporary. Yi Xian looked at Fong Wenqing, and in the next moment he suddenly drew his sword. The sword was very fast. Before Fong Wenqing could react, Yi Xian's sword was already at the center of her eyebrows. Everyone's expression changed, but Fong Wenqing's expression was calm and not a trace of fear. Yi Xian looked at Fong Wenqing and said, Miss Fong, I think you're beautiful. Why don't you be my wife? Fong Wenqing looked at Yi Xian and said, Young Master Yi, what do you mean? Yi Xian smiled and said, You'll live a good life if you follow me. Even though you don't agree now and even feel disrespected, it's fine. I'll treat you well in the future. In any case, cruelty is only temporary. How could Fong Wenqing not understand Yi Xian's meaning? She fell silent. Yi Xian said, Imposing one's will on another is a cruel and immoral thing. As he spoke, he sheathed his sword and said with a smile, I, Yi Xian, have relied on the sword in my hand to arrive here from Pine City. I rarely reason with others. Because in my opinion, 10 sentences of reasoning aren't as effective as a single sword strike in our world. After he finished speaking, he looked at Nangong Wan and said, Miss Nangong, I've finished reasoning with you. Can you take me somewhere else? Nangong Wan nodded slightly and said, Young Master Yi, follow me. As soon as she finished speaking, the two of them intended to leave. However, right at this moment, a man stepped forward from afar, and he stood in front of Yi Xian and said, I challenge you. Fong Wenqing frowned slightly and said, Mo Lin, what are you doing? The man called Mo Lin looked Yi Xian in the eye and said, Do you dare? Yi Xian asked, What's the reason? Mo Lin gazed at Yi Xian and said, I don't like the sight of you. As soon as he finished speaking, one of his arms suddenly flew into the air. Blood sprayed. Everyone here was stunned. Scholar Su's face sank. Yi Xian's sword was too swift and he wasn't able to stop it at all. Mo Lin's face was pale as he stared fixedly at Yi Xian without a trace of fear in his eyes, and he said, Kill me if you can. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Look at you. You say you don't like the sight of me, but on what basis? Because of that mouth of yours? After you noticed that you couldn't defeat me, you said that I would kill you if I could. Why do you dare to say that? Because you feel that you have the Ocean Academy behind you and I'm in the Ocean Academy right now. So you're fearless and feel that I would definitely not dare to kill you. Is that so? Mo Lin stared fixedly at Yi Xian and his gaze seemed capable of killing. Yi Xian chuckled and said, Being angry yet not attacking is the sign of a powerless person. Since you don't like the sight of me, then hit me. Hurry up and hit me. Mo Lin's face was livid with rage. He'd wanted to attack Xianxia on many occasions, but he didn't dare to. Because he knew that Xianxia could end his life with a single strike of his sword. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, I don't like the sight of you as well. As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and slapped Mo Lin. Flap. Mo Lin's figure was blasted flying, and he flew for over 300 m. Mo Lin crashed to the ground 300 m away, but he quickly stood up and glared angrily at Yi Xian. When had he ever suffered such humiliation? He was about to attack Mo Lin when Scholar Su suddenly said, Take him away and expel him from the academy. Mo Lin was stunned when he heard this. In next to no time, 2 guards of the academy took Mo Lin away. Scholar Su gazed at Yi Xian and said, I've embarrassed myself in front of City Governor Yi. Yi Xian smiled and said, I was a bit impulsive just now. I hope Scholar Su can forgive me. Scholar Su shook his head and said, Young man, suffering a loss isn't a bad thing. It would be a good thing if he can learn a lesson from this incident. Yi Xian smiled and then he looked at Nangong Wan and said, Miss Nangong, can I go take a look at your imperial palace? Nangong Wan smiled and said, It's the divine palace. Yi Xian nodded and said, Can I go take a look? Nangong Wan nodded and said, You can. However, you can only see a portion of the outer area. Yi Xian nodded and said, All right. Nangong Wan looked at Scholar Su and said, Scholar Su, farewell. Scholar Su bowed slightly and said, Take care, state scholar Nangong. Nangong Wan nodded and then she left with Yi Xian. On the way, Nangong Wan smiled and said, Young Master Yi, do you know why Mo Lin doesn't like you? Yi Xian smiled and said, He's interested in that Miss Fong. Nangong Wan nodded and said, Young Master Yi pointed his sword at Miss Fong at the end. He should be angry. Yi Xian smiled and said, I don't have any bad intentions. Nangong Wan smiled and said, I know. You only chopped off one of his hands. Yi Xian was speechless. After a while, Yi Xian and Nangong Wan arrived at the Divine Palace. As soon as they entered the Divine Palace, they saw Wu Anning's statue. Looking at the statue, Yi Xian said softly, Is this the founder of your god nation? Nangong Wan nodded and said, My god nation's first-generation divine master. Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, Yi Xian suddenly looked to his right. There was a person there. When he saw that person, Yi Xian was shocked and said, How could it be you? You. P.S. Kidney damage. What kind of food is more nutritious? I'm asking on behalf of the readers. Chapter 607. He knew the newcomer. And it was an old friend. The State Preceptor Lu he had met in the kingdom of Jiang. At this moment, State Preceptor Lu was still sitting in a wheelchair, his hair still white. State Preceptor Lu looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Young Master Yi, long time no see. Yi Xian said in a low voice, State Preceptor Lu, you? State Preceptor Lu smiled. My name is Lu Yu and I'm from the Kingdom of God. The Kingdom of God. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, What about Mo Yuan and Feng Lan? Lu Yu said, They're from the Confucian school. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. If you're from the Kingdom of God, why would you go to such a small place? Shengguan smiled. Miss Lu Yu and the others are only going to the small world to spread our Kingdom of God's culture. Young Master, you might not know this, but your Qingzhou already has the Confucian school and the military school, which add up to 100 schools. And now, the Kingdom of Jiang and the Firmament World's Firmament Sword sect are developing so fast that it might be beyond young Master Ye's imagination. Unfortunately, you've been busy all these years. Otherwise, you'd be surprised if you went back. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Why are you doing this? What's your purpose? Lu Yu said softly, To spread our own culture. Yi Xian asked, Then why go to such a small place? Lu Yu smiled. Going to the great world would attract too much attention and cause a lot of trouble. Moreover, there are too many forces in the great world. It's difficult to spread one's own culture peacefully. Yi Xian was silent. Lu Yu said again, Young Master Yi, if you have time, you must return to the firmament world. Great changes have happened there. You'll be surprised. Yi Xian nodded. I will. Lu Yu smiled. I won't disturb young Master Yi today. With that she turned and left. Yi Xian said softly, Besides the firmament world, you have people in other worlds, right? Shengguan nodded. Quite a few. Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. You have a lot of plans. Shengguan said softly, I agree with what young Master Yi said in Songhai College. War is cruel, but young Master Yi, does it mean that it's even crueler? We have a team of advisors who are always studying your side. Your side has been at war all year round, and the ultimate reason is that it's too scattered. All the forces, aristocratic families as well as sects big and small have their own way of doing things. On your side there's no culture or spiritual belief and you only believe in the strong. Yuz is Yi and Yi king gods who is. Yes Yi king Yi temple? Kingdom Yu king of Yi Yi kin of kingdom. Yi Xian said king. Wei Xian said. Guan Xian of. Not in any way derogatory, at least not from me. I sir I precation I lu precipin I precoff I Xian king I Xian. There was Qing Yi I Shi I Yi I prek king Shen I king long prek he, one master Shen one prek and prek they were masters of 100 battles. Yi Xian had sensed this precipin from the Tang clan cavalry. Yi Xian knew that these precipin soldiers were not the Kingdom of God's most elite soldiers. The precipin soldiers came to Yi Xian and Shengguan. They bowed to Shengguan and left. Yi Xian glanced at Shengguan. Miss Shengguan is highly respected by the Kingdom of God. Shengguan said with a smile. The Kingdom of God respects not only the strong but also the learned. The Kingdom of God is divided into two factions, the civil and the martial. Even though the divine image of the Kingdom of God cultivates, it's only to strengthen his body. I'm afraid he can't even defeat a soldier. But he's highly respected in the kingdom of God. Even the Master God has to address him as teacher. She made an inviting gesture. Young Master Yi, let's meet the commander of the kingdom of God's Imperial Guard. He's ranked 10th on the divine martial list. Yi Xian nodded and continued to move forward with Shangguan. Soon after, at Shangguan's place. Under Shangguan's lead, the two of them arrived at a training field. There were hundreds of soldiers on the training field and they were currently training. And in front of these hundreds of soldiers stood a young man. The young man was dressed in plain clothes. He stood ramrod straight and held a long spear in his hand. When he saw Yi Xian and Shangguan, the young man walked straight over and bowed slightly to Shangguan. Greetings, Kingdom Scholar Shangguan. Shangguan smiled. Ling Yi, would you like to have a spar with our city lord Yi? Ling Yi looked at Yi Xian. Please enlighten me. A moment later, the two of them appeared on a sparring platform in the training field. There were hundreds of soldiers standing around them. Ling Yi looked at Yi Xian and made an inviting gesture. Yi Xian looked up at Ling Yi. The next moment, a flying sword appeared in front of Ling Yi without any warning. Ling Yi was expressionless. He raised his hand and shot. Clang. The flying sword was instantly sent flying. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of Ling Yi. Almost at the same time, Ling Yi stabbed with his spear. Boom. Yi Xian was forced to a stop, but Ling Yi was also forced to retreat several steps. The moment he stopped, a flying sword suddenly slashed at him. Ling Yi held his spear horizontally. Clang. An ear-piercing sound of metal clashing rang out. Ling Yi retreated several meters, but in the next moment his body spun and the spear in his hand pierced forward. The spear stabbed out and the space was directly torn apart. Boom. Yi Xian was instantly forced to retreat, but the next moment, several flying swords slashed at Ling Yi from different angles. Ling Ye's expression did not change and he swung his spear swiftly. Boom 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 boom. All the flying swords were blocked by Ling Ye's spear. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared he was already in front of Ling Yi. At the same time he drew his sword and slashed. It was only a creation-grade sword which was at the same level as Ling Ye's spear. Since it was a spar he naturally would not use heavenly punishment. Drawing his sword would determine life and death. As the sword slashed down, a powerful sword aura instantly enveloped Ling Yi. When he sensed the power in Yi Xian's sword, Ling Ye's calm expression finally changed. He stomped his right foot and a powerful force suddenly appeared around his body. The next moment he thrust his spear forward. It was a thrust. It was a simple movement but it carried a tremendous force. It was a clash of pure strength. Boom. The moment the two swords and spears collided, they separated and retreated rapidly. However, very quickly the two of them stopped at the same time. At this moment, Ling Yi suddenly leaped into the air. In the air, Ling Ye's expression was slightly malevolent, and the spear in his hand suddenly shot towards Yi Xian. The spear pierced through the air as though it wanted to pierce through heaven and earth. Yi Xian lightly tapped his right foot and his entire body rose from the ground. Almost at the same time, a sword light slashed against the spear. Boom. The surrounding space trembled violently, and in the next moment, under the astonished gazes of everyone, countless flying swords slashed towards Ling Yi. The sky was filled with flying swords. In the air, Ling Yi retreated again and again. In front of him, Yi Xian frantically drew his sword and slashed repeatedly. In addition to the flying swords in the surroundings, it was difficult for Ling Yi to deal with them. This was because Yi Xian's flying swords were too fast. They were so fast that he didn't dare to be distracted. In addition, Yi Xian was fiercely attacking in front of him so he could only passively defend. He wanted to attack a few times, but he was interrupted by Yi Xian's flying swords. Just like that, when Ling Yi retreated several hundred meters away, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. At this moment, there were more than 10 sword marks around Ling Ye's body. Yi Xian sheathed his sword and said, "Thank you for letting me win." Ling Yi looked at Yi Xian and said, "I've lost." As soon as he said this, the expressions of the soldiers in the field changed. This Ling Yi was a genius on the divine martial role. He had actually lost. At this moment, a laughter suddenly sounded from the side. "Commander Ling, you're wrong." Everyone looked over and saw a young man wearing a black robe with dragon patterns. Yi Xian looked at the youth. Beside him, Nan Gongwan said, "Shang Qiu, the commander of the Featherwood Guard." Yi Xian nodded slightly. Xianxia first bowed slightly at Nangongwan, then looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "City Lord Yi, the battle just now was a little unfair." Yi Xian laughed and said, "How is it unfair?" Xianxia smiled and said, "Commander Ling is the commander of the Imperial Guards. What he cultivates is how to kill people. This regular martial arts competition has too many restrictions on him. City Lord Yi, haven't you noticed that Commander Ling has always been merciful?" At this point he smiled. "City Lord Yi. He's afraid of killing you." Not far away Ling Yi frowned. "Xianxia, I've lost. I can afford to lose." Xianxia looked at Ling Yi. "You are now representing my god nation. You have to think this through." Ling Yi was silent. Xianxia looked at Yi Xian. "City Lord Yi, let's have a rematch without any restrictions. It's the kind that puts your life on the line. Do you want to play?" Yi Xian was a little hesitant. Xianxia smiled and said, "If City Lord Yi is afraid, it's fine." Yi Xian gritted his teeth. "It's not impossible to have a rematch, but I have a request. I want to place a bet." Xianxia raised his eyebrows. "What bet?" Yi Xian looked at Xianxia. "If you lose, you have to give me a Dao realm treasure." Dao realm treasure. Xianxia's face darkened when he heard this. This thing was very precious even in the Divine Kingdom. Seeing Xianxia's silence, Yi Xian's expression immediately relaxed and he even smiled. "Well, if not, then there's no need to compete." Xianxia looked at Yi Xian. "Who said there isn't?" As he said this, he opened his palm and a small golden person suddenly appeared in his palm. Yi Xian was a little curious. "What is this?" Nangongwan smiled and said, "A golden man, a Dao realm golden man created by the Mo family. When activated, this golden man is comparable to a pinnacle Dao mastery expert. If there is enough spiritual qi, it can even contend against a Tendo expert. Moreover, it is made of special materials and even a Tendo expert cannot destroy it in a short time. It's very useful for protecting one's life in a fight. Also, it's very precious." Yi Xian nodded slightly. He had some golden men in the past, but they were very weak now. This one in front of him should be an upgraded version. At this moment Xianxia suddenly said, "What if you lose?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, "If I lose, I will leave my life here and all my treasures will be yours." Xianxia looked at Yi Xian. "Remember what you said?" Yi Xian nodded. "Under normal circumstances I still keep my word." Xianxia said indifferently, "Then let's begin." Yi Xian said, "Give the treasures to Nangong Guosher." Xianxia glanced at Yi Xian, then gave the little golden man to Nangongwan. Yi Xian looked at Ling Yi and the latter bowed slightly. "This battle concerns the honor of our god nation, so I will not hold back. You must also do your best." Yi Xian nodded. "All right." As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his right palm and a sword appeared in it. Soul-suppressing sword. A Dao realm sword. When they saw this sword, Ling Yi and Xianxia's expressions changed. At this moment Yi Xian opened his left hand, and the executing heaven sword appeared in his hand. When he saw the executing heaven sword, Xianxia's expression changed. A sword that surpasses the Dao realm. Ling Ye's expression became extremely ugly. At this moment Yi Xian carried the two swords and walked towards Ling Yi. "Brother Ling, don't hold back. If I use these two swords, your spear might not be able to withstand it. If you really can't, go borrow a few more spears." Ling Yi. Chapter 608. The atmosphere in the surroundings suddenly became slightly silent. A Dao realm sword, a sword that surpassed the Dao realm. Moreover, it was in the hands of a sword saint. How could he fight? Ling Ye's face was filled with bitterness. If Yi Xian fought him fairly, he would still be confident. However, when he saw the two swords, he completely despaired. Even if he took out a Dao realm spear, he wouldn't be able to withstand the sword that surpassed the Dao realm. A sword that surpassed the Dao realm. In the hands of Yi Xian, the increase in battle strength wasn't just a little bit. Yi Xian looked at Ling Yi. "Brother Ling, make your move." Ling Yi looked at Yi Xian. In the next moment he suddenly dashed forward, and the spear in his hand rushed out like a raging dragon. Bang! As this spear shot out, the surrounding space shook violently. Yi Xian slashed down with the sword in his left hand. The sword slashed down and Ling Ye's spear was directly split into two. Ling Yi, who was about to continue his attack, stopped. Looking at the broken spear in front of him, Ling Yi fell silent. Yi Xian said, Brother Ling Yi, do you still want to fight? Ling Yi shook his head. I can't defeat you. His tone was calm, but it carried a trace of anger. This was clearly bullying. Yi Xian looked at Xianxia, who was not far away. The latter was about to speak, but Yi Xian suddenly smiled. You wouldn't say that I'm unfair to Brother Ling Yi with these two swords, right? Xianxia said in a deep voice. This is unfair. Yi Xian laughed. Unfair? Who fought to the death just now? Who didn't have any restrictions? Didn't you say so? Xianxia's expression was quite unsightly. Yi Xian smiled coldly. So this is a genius of God Nation. I, Yi Xian, don't want this Dao realm treasure anymore. As he spoke, he looked at Nangong Wan. Miss Nangong, farewell. After that, he turned around and left. At this time, Nangong Wan suddenly appeared beside Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, don't you want this treasure? Yi Xian said indifferently. I don't dare. God Nation's geniuses are so shameless. This has truly refreshed my understanding of shamelessness. I don't want this. I don't want it even if you give it to me. With that, he quickened his pace. Nangong Wan turned around to glance at Xianxia. The latter's expression was rather unsightly, and he hesitated for a moment before he said, Young Master Yi, wait a moment. However, Yi Xian did not stop. Xianxia's expression changed. Finally, he suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, my words were inappropriate. You win. That treasure is yours. Yi Xian said indifferently. Commander Shang, you seem to be slightly disgruntled. Xianxia said indifferently. What else does young Master Yi want? Yi Xian glanced at the golden figure and said, Why don't we make another bet? Xianxia gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said, Let's have another competition. I won't use these two swords. How about it? Xianxia's eyes narrowed slightly. Really? Yi Xian nodded. Really? If you win, I'll return this little golden man to you. However, if you lose, you'll have to give me another little golden man or a Dao realm treasure. Do you dare to bet? Xianxia stared fixedly at Yi Xian. You really won't use these two swords? Yi Xian nodded. I absolutely won't. I swear to the heavens. Xianxia remained silent for a moment and then he gazed at Ling Yi. The latter hesitated for a moment before he opened his right hand, and a golden figure appeared there. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he witnessed this scene. Ling Yi has won as well. Xianxia gazed at Yi Xian. I'll add one more. If you lose, then you have to compensate Brother Ling Yi with a Creation Realm spear. Yi Xian nodded. All right. Which one of you will go first? Ling Yi was about to speak when Xianxia spoke abruptly. I'll do it. I just happen to want to witness young Master Ye's true strength. As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm and a black iron rod silently appeared there. The iron rod was completely pitch black and it emanated a ghastly aura. The Dao realm. Yi Xian fell silent. He hadn't expected that Xianxia would actually possess a Dao realm treasure. Could it be that Dao realm treasures are like cabbages in the Divine Kingdom? Meanwhile, Xianxia waved the iron rod in his hand and smiled. City Governor Yi, prepare a few more swords. Because I'm afraid your swords won't be able to withstand my iron rod. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. You don't allow me to use Dao realm swords, yet you use them yourself. Aren't you a little too shameless? Xianxia spoke indifferently. Shameless? Didn't I learn that from you, young Master Yi? Let's fight. As soon as he finished speaking, he leaped forward. In the next moment, countless iron rod images covered the heavens and the earth as they enveloped Yi Xian. Right at this moment, the ground beneath Yi Xian's feet started to tremble violently. In the next moment, the energy of the earth surged towards Yi Xian like tidewater. Nangong Wan's beautiful brows knit together slightly when she witnessed this scene. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly charged forward. He didn't utilize his sword and he smashed his fist forward instead. Bang! The countless afterimages instantly vanished, whereas Xianxia was blasted over 1 kilometer away. At this moment, the entire practice grounds had been overturned and it was in a mess. He'd lost with a single punch. The energy of the earth. Yi Xian closed his eyes slowly and he slowly relaxed his right hand. In next to no time, the energy of the earth returned to the ground. The energy of the earth was one of his trump cards. Especially now, he could instantly mobilize the energy of the earth and the earth veins in an area of almost 5,000 kilometers. If he was given some time, he could even gather the energy of the earth and the earth veins in an area of 50,000 kilometers. After he gathered so much energy of the earth and the earth veins, his strength would absolutely far exceed the Dao validation realm. It should be said that even a Dao mastery realm expert wouldn't be able to resist him, and only experts at the level of the Star Lord and the others would be able to resist his grand Dao law. Xian looked towards the distance. At this moment, Xianxia had already fallen on the earth veins. He was just about to stand up when Xian suddenly appeared in front of him. Xianxia's expression changed. Xian didn't kill him, and Xian had seized the black iron rod in Xianxia's hand. Xianxia's expression changed. He'd just spoken when a sword was suddenly pressed against his neck. Xian looked at Xianxia. You've lost. According to the agreement, we had a life and death duel just now. In other words, I can kill you. However, I, Xian, am not a ruthless person. I can spare your life, but the battle with you just now took a huge toll on me. I want 5 million divine crystals as compensation. You don't have any objections, do you? Xianxia stared at Xian. Are you blackmailing me? Xian nodded. It seems like you're not going to compensate me for my losses. As soon as he finished speaking, his sword slashed down. One of Xianxia's arms flew off and blood spurted out like a fountain. However, Xianxia didn't even bat an eyelid. He just stared at Xian. Xian didn't waste any words, nor did he hesitate. He slashed his sword at Xianxia's head. At this moment, a spear suddenly pierced through the air. Clang! Xian's sword was blocked by Ling Ye's spear. Meanwhile, the soldiers in the surroundings suddenly encircled them. Xian glanced at them and grinned. Can't accept defeat? Right at this moment, Nangongwan spoke abruptly. Give 5 million divine crystals to young Master Yi. Xianxia's expression was slightly unsightly. He was just about to speak when Nangongwan glanced at him. Her gaze was very calm, but Xianxia's heart trembled. He didn't dare speak another word, and he immediately turned around and left. Nangongwan waved her right hand lightly, and it didn't take long for the soldiers in the surroundings to leave. Nangongwan walked over to Xian, and then she returned the 2 golden figures to Xian. After that she said, Young Master Yi, my divine kingdom is willing to bet and I concede defeat. These are yours. Xian didn't refuse and he immediately put the 2 golden figures away. After that he said, Thank you, Miss Nangong. Nangongwan shook her head. You deserve it. Xian was just about to speak when Xianxia walked over, and then he tapped with his left hand, causing a spatial ring to fly over to Xian. There were exactly 5 million divine crystals within the spatial ring. Xian put the 5 million divine crystals away, and then he gazed at Nangongwan. Miss Nangong, I've disturbed you for so long. It's time for me to leave. Nangongwan said, Young Master Yi is leaving just like that? Xian nodded. Nangongwan nodded lightly. Young Master Yi, I want to take you to see my divine kingdom's army before I leave. Do you want to come with me? Xian thought for a moment and said, All right. Nangongwan said, Come with me. She turned around and left once she finished speaking. Xian hurriedly followed after her. Meanwhile, Nangongwan suddenly stopped moving and she glanced at Xianxia who stood nearby. On many occasions, failure isn't terrifying. What's terrifying is giving up after failure. Don't think that young Master Yi is playing dirty with all of you. A true man is courageous after knowing shame. She turned around and left once she finished speaking. Xianxia hurriedly bowed to Nangongwan. Thank you, State Scholar Nangong. On the road not far away, Nangongwan said softly, I've underestimated young Master Yi. Xian smiled. Miss Nangong is the one who's truly unfathomable. Up until now he still couldn't sense Nangongwan's realm. You definitely knew, but he didn't dare disturb this fellow who was sleeping. This Yu's temper was too violent. It was best to keep a low profile before he could defeat him. Nangongwan smiled. Young Master Yi, are you interested in joining our divine kingdom? Join divine kingdom. Xian shook his head. I'm not interested for now. He still couldn't figure out divine kingdom's true intentions. Join divine kingdom? He didn't dare and he didn't want to. He just wanted divine martial city to be like before where no one dared to bully him. But joining divine kingdom meant that he would have to lead the sword sects Wuyuan to submit to divine kingdom. He definitely wouldn't do that. Nan Gongwan nodded and didn't say anything else. Soon the two of them arrived at the peak of a mountain. Yi Xian looked down and saw 10,000 soldiers sitting cross-legged on the ground, cultivating. At this time Nan Gongwan suddenly said, "Brothers of the Ninth Corps, greet City Lord Yi." The soldiers below suddenly raised their heads. In the next moment, all of them stood up and roared in unison. "Greetings, City Lord Yi." Their voices were like thunder, shaking the sky and the mountains. At the same time, a powerful momentum suddenly soared up from below. This momentum instantly arrived in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian waved his right hand and a sword momentum surged out. However, the moment the sword momentum appeared, it instantly collapsed. Bang! Yi Xian retreated violently in an instant. This time he retreated as far as 10,000 feet. At this time the 10,000 soldiers suddenly raised their spears and roared in unison. "Kill!" Bang! Countless fighting intents suddenly soared into the sky. In the end they formed a giant blade that was thousands of feet long in the air. As the giant blade showed up, a strong killing intent shrouded Yi Xian, who was not far away. Being enveloped by the killing intent, Yi Xian's expression instantly became ferocious. In the next moment the blood in his body started to tremble. P.S. It's a true story. 2 years ago I borrowed a sum of money and he still hasn't returned it to me. When I borrowed it he said that he would return it next month. He didn't say a word next month. Not only that, he dragged it on for 2 years. Now that I urgently need money I took the initiative to ask him for it, but he kept dragging it on. When you were in trouble I helped you out. Now that I'm in trouble you play tricks with me. As the saying goes, the one who owes money is the master. No, this is not the master, it's the ancestor. Now because I asked him to return the money, our relationship as relatives has deteriorated. Let me give everyone a piece of advice. If you can avoid borrowing money, don't borrow money. Sometimes it's really frustrating, especially when you ask the other party to return the money. Lending money to you is for you to turn over a new leaf, not for you to turn against them. Cherish those who are willing to lend money to you because they trust you. Don't let them down. Is there any reader who has a similar experience as me? Chapter 609. Gradually a red glow appeared around Yi Xian. At the same time, a murderous intent slowly spread out from his body. Nan Gongwan looked at Yi Xian calmly. At this moment the giant blade in the air suddenly slashed towards Yi Xian in the distance. Yi Xian's expression turned sinister. In the next moment he held the all-heaven sword with both hands and slashed down. With a slash of the sword the giant blade was instantly shattered. It was so easy that all the soldiers below were stunned. Yi Xian closed his eyes and held the executing heaven sword tightly in his right hand. Suppress. At this moment he was actively suppressing the bloodline in his body. He didn't want to be controlled by this bloodline. Nan Gongwan looked at Yi Xian. "Young Master Yi, our god nation has 9 such legions. Above them there are 3 paladin legions. There aren't many of them and each of them has only 1,000 people. However, they are all peak creation realm experts and each of them has the strength to fight against Dao realm experts. Above the paladin legions there are His Majesty's personal guards. There are only 1,000 people but they are all Dao realm experts. Above them are the divine martial army and the dark guards. I don't know how strong these people are. Apart from them our god nation has 36 sections. These 36 sects have their own Dao soldiers. There are also some ancient families with their own elites. I don't know how strong these elites are." Speaking of this she smiled and said, "These are not our god nation's strongest troops. Our god nation's strongest troops are the god nation's guardians. Their numbers are unknown and their strength is unknown. However, I can tell young Master Yi that with your current strength, you are not qualified to join the god nation's guardians. Young Master Yi, what are you going to use to fight us? Especially you. If you don't surrender now, it will be different when our god nation's sword hangs over divine martial city in the future." As Nan Gongwan's voice fell, 10 men in black suddenly appeared around Yi Xian. Yi Xian forcefully suppressed the killing intent in his mind and said softly, "We were just talking nicely. Why do you want to make a move?" Nan Gongwan smiled and said, "Young Master Yi, I hope you don't get angry. Your talent is not bad but there are many people in Scandinavia who are more outstanding than you. Therefore you can leave. However, we want the pagoda in your body." Yi Xian looked at Nan Gongwan. "What if I don't give it to you?" Nan Gongwan made an inviting gesture. "Then let's invite young Master Yi to begin your performance." A watch. Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. A wisp of blood-red sword energy suddenly pierced through Nangong Wan's forehead. However, Yi Xian's face sank. Because the sword had only pierced through an afterimage, Nangong Wan was already 1,000 feet away, and she still had a faint smile on her face. Yi Xian didn't waste any time. A spatial stone suddenly appeared in his palm and he vanished into thin air. Nangong Wan's eyes narrowed slightly. Spatial teleportation stone. As she spoke, she raised her head and looked towards the sky. Spatial. As soon as she finished speaking, the space in the distant horizon started to tremble violently, and it didn't take long for strands of mysterious energy to appear incessantly in that space. Yi Xian suddenly noticed that the space in front of him was actually covered in layers of obstructions. His expression instantly changed and then he hurriedly circulated the spatial Dao laws. In next to no time, countless strands of spatial energy appeared in the surroundings, and then the mysterious energy was directly shattered by this spatial energy. Space loosened, and Yi Xian relied on the spatial Dao laws to directly teleport through space. In the blink of an eye, he'd arrived at God Burial Plains. A certain space in the sky above God Burial Plains suddenly split open, and then Yi Xian flew out from within it. In the next moment he shot straight towards the Great Wall. Right at this moment, an enormous hand suddenly appeared in the sky behind him. In the next moment, the enormous hand carried a destructive force as it smashed down towards him. The powerful force caused the space in the surroundings to start cracking apart. The enormous hand descended extremely quickly, and it arrived above Yi Xian in the blink of an eye. Yi Xian turned around. He drew his sword and slashed. All Heaven's sword. The enormous hand was instantly slashed apart as soon as his sword descended, but Yi Xian himself was instantly blasted over 10 kilometers away. Yi Xian had just descended to the ground when his figure shook, and he was within the Great Wall when his figure appeared once more. As soon as Yi Xian turned around, the distant sky had returned to normal. Meanwhile, some experts appeared by Yi Xian's side, and all of them were experts from the various desolate worlds. Blood flowed from the corners of Yi Xian's mouth. At this moment, all his internal organs had been blasted apart. Isn't that Yi Xian? What happened to him? It looks like he was beaten up by the members of the divine nation. Isn't he very strong? How did he get beaten up like this as soon as he arrived in the divine nation? Yi Xian paid no attention to them. He just sat cross-legged on the ground and started to devour divine crystals and spirit fruits. About half an hour later, Yi Xian's injuries were mostly healed. He stood up and walked toward the sky trampling hall. Soon Yi Xian arrived at the sky trampling hall, where the Astral Lord and the others were already present. Apart from the Astral Lord and the others, there were two others, Commander Chu and a middle-aged man in armor. Everyone was looking at Yi Xian. Yi Xian waved his right hand and Gu Taishan's corpse appeared in front of the Astral Lord. Seeing Gu Taishan's corpse, the Astral Lord's expression changed slightly. He glanced at Yi Xian and quickly put away Gu Taishan's corpse. At this time, Perfected Master Chu said, "Little friend Yi, did you find out anything about the divine nation?" Yi Xian nodded. "A little." Perfected Master Chu said, "How strong are they?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Much, much stronger than we imagined." As he spoke, he told them about the army that Nangong Wan had told him about. After listening to Yi Xian, the hall suddenly fell silent. If it was really as Yi Xian said, then the divine nation's strength was extraordinary. Meanwhile, the armored man suddenly said, "City Governor Yi, how did you find out about something as confidential as the divine nation?" Everyone looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Do you think I'm lying to you?" The armored man shook his head. "I'm just thinking, how did young Master Yi know about something as confidential as the divine nation in such detail?" Yi Xian said, "I naturally have my ways." He naturally wouldn't say that Nangong Wan told him because if he did, these people would definitely think that he was colluding with the divine nation. The armored man smiled. "City Governor Yi, the divine nation might be very strong, but it's definitely not as strong as you say." Yi Xian looked at the armored man. "You are." The armored man smiled. "Li Qian, one of the deputy commanders of the divine army." Yi Xian said, "If Commander Li doesn't believe me, you can send someone else to the divine nation to investigate." Li Qian looked at Yi Xian. "City Governor Yi, you better explain how you know so much about the divine nation's secrets." Yi Xian smiled. Commander Li, I really won't say. Bite me? Li Qian's eyes narrowed slightly and a powerful aura suddenly crushed towards Yi Xian. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly charged forward and slashed down with his sword. That aura was instantly slashed apart. Li Qian suddenly stabbed forward with his spear. Li Qian's spear was directly slashed apart by Yi Xian's sword. At this moment, a powerful force suddenly pushed Yi Xian and Li Qian back. Both of them returned to their original positions at the same time. The one who attacked was Perfected Chu. Perfected Chu looked at the two of them. Now is not the time for internal strife. Then he looked at Yi Xian. Little friend Yi, how did you know about the Divine Nation's secrets? Did you know about the Divine Nation's secrets? Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then said, A kingdom knight told me. Perfected Chu asked, The Divine Nation didn't capture you? They even told you? Yi Xian nodded. Seeing Yi Xian nod, Li Qian immediately sneered. The expressions of everyone present also became strange. Yi Xian shook his head. It was not easy to tell the truth, but no one believed him. What kind of world was this? Beside him, Tang Yan said solemnly, Little friend Yi, can you tell us why they not only didn't capture you but also told you so many secrets? Yi Xian spread his hands. It seems that everyone doesn't believe me. Tang Yan shook his head. It's not that we don't believe you, but this is really strange. At this moment Chu Kuang suddenly said, This must be a conspiracy by the Divine Nation. Everyone looked at Chu Kuang. Chu Kuang said solemnly, If they're really that strong, why haven't they made a move? There's only one explanation. They're not as strong as we expected. In fact, they're weak. Moreover, they told City Lord Yi these things to scare us and affect our morale so that we won't dare to attack them. Li Qian nodded slightly. That makes sense. If they're really as strong as some people say, they would have already sent an army to attack us. But now there's no movement at all. There's only one explanation, and that's that they're using our power to intimidate us. At this point he glanced at Yi Xian and said, And the reason they let City Lord Yi come back is probably to use him to affect our morale. I suggest that we organize an attack and take the initiative to attack the Divine Nation. Take the initiative to attack the Divine Nation. Yi Xian was silent. Beside him, the southern faction martial master shook his head. Taking the initiative to attack is too risky. Li Qian said, Senior martial master, we must fight. The southern faction martial master asked, Why? Li Qian said solemnly, Because there are too many powerhouses from all over the wasteland world who want to fight. These people all want to kill their way into the Divine Nation. If we continue to suppress them, it may cause the opposite effect and wear down their morale and fighting spirit. The southern faction martial master frowned slightly. They want to fight so badly? This is because... At this point he paused and then said, Greed. Greed. What was the purpose of these powerhouses from all over the wasteland world? To protect the three wastelands? Not exactly. Their main purpose was to enter the Divine Nation. A brand new nation meant unlimited wealth. Many people were thirsting for it. At this moment Li Qian, who was at the side, suddenly looked at Yi Xian. The Divine Nation not only told Lord Yi so many so-called secrets, but also let Lord Yi come back. For the sake of safety, I suggest that from now on, Lord Yi, until we return in triumph, you are not allowed to take even half a step out of the Sky-Stepping Palace. Yi Xian was still silent. At this time the Astral Master suddenly said, The Divine Nation even let go of ancient Astral Lord's corpse. Obviously they are not as strong as we thought. Let's launch an attack. As the saying goes, the first to strike has the upper hand. If they don't do it, then we will. As he said this, he glanced at Yi Xian. To avoid unnecessary trouble, City Lord Yi should temporarily stay in the Heaven Stepping Hall for this period of time. At this time Spiritual Master Chu looked at Yi Xian. Do you have anything to say? Yi Xian was silent for a moment and then said, As Commander Li, Commander Chu and the Astral Master said, the Divine Nation may not be as strong as we thought. They might even be a fox pretending to be a tiger. So, since the seniors want to attack the Divine Nation, then attack. I will listen to you. Spiritual Master Chu glanced at Yi Xian and then looked at the Astral Master. Organize a group of powerhouses and launch a surprise attack. The Astral Master nodded. Surprise attack the Divine Nation. Chapter 610. After Spiritual Master Chu and the others made their decision, they left the sky-trampling hall. Only Yi Xian and the southern sect martial artist were left in the hall. Yi Xian sat on a chair, his face expressionless. Greed. Sometimes greed would devour one's reason. Attack the divine nation? He suddenly realized that in this chaotic chaosverse, there were many times when there was no right or wrong. Before coming, spiritual master Chu had told him that defending the divine nation was for the sake of the world. However, it was all bullshit. These people from various desolate worlds had come here for him. The divine nation wanted to conquer them, and they wanted to conquer the divine nation. Who was right and who was wrong? It was all the same. Everyone in the hall felt that the divine nation was not that powerful, but he knew that Nangongwan had no reason to lie to him. Moreover, the divine nation might be even more powerful than Nangongwan said. However, he did not want to care. He had come here to defend the divine nation with these people and protect Shenwu City. Now it seemed that he was wrong. These people had come for him, and once they entered the divine nation, they would definitely become demons. Sometimes human nature could be so dark that one could not recognize oneself. Yi Xian was about to get up and leave when the southern sect martial master nearby suddenly said, "I believe what you said earlier." Yi Xian looked at the southern sect martial artist. He had stayed behind to watch him, obviously afraid that he would inform the divine nation. Thinking of this, Yi Xian could not help but laugh at himself. At this time, the southern sect martial artist said, "They will definitely fail." Yi Xian looked at the southern sect martial artist. "Then why didn't you stop them?" The southern sect martial artist smiled. "How? There are hundreds of thousands of people here, and in their eyes, the divine nation is a big fat sheep that everyone wants." Yi Xian said, "Ordinary people might not understand, but can the planet lord and spiritual master Chu not understand?" The southern sect martial artist shook his head. "They are greedier. Moreover, they need someone to use their life to test the divine nation's strength." Hearing this, Yi Xian immediately understood. The southern sect's martial arts master suddenly said, "Young friend Yi, the old man has a presumptuous request." Yi Xian looked at the southern sect's martial arts master. "Senior, please speak." The southern sect martial master said, "That disciple of mine is stubborn and doesn't know how to be flexible. If there are any changes in the future, I hope City Lord Yi can take care of him." With that, he flicked his finger and a storage ring landed in front of Yi Xian. There was a Dao realm treasure inside the storage ring. The southern sect's martial arts master smiled and said, "This is my only Dao realm treasure. That girl doesn't like it, so young Master Yi, please don't look down on it." Yi Xian flicked his finger and flicked the storage ring back to the southern sect martial master. The southern sect martial master looked at Yi Xian and waited for him to continue. Yi Xian said softly, "Senior has spoken up for me several times before. I have always remembered this favor in my heart. I can't guarantee anything else, but if Miss Zhao is in danger in the future, I will do my best to help her." Although Yi Xian liked treasures, he did have a bottom line. He had never forgotten someone who had helped him before. The southern sect's martial arts master glanced at Yi Xian and smiled. "Young friend Yi, now I understand why Wu Wen and Yu Wuchen handed the sword sect and Wu Yuan to you." Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Senior, do you have any relationship with Wu Yuan?" The southern sect's martial arts master smiled and said, "A little. My master left Wu Yuan in the past. However, he was expelled, so he is not considered a member of Wu Yuan." Hearing this, Yi Xian suddenly understood. No wonder the southern sect's martial arts master spoke up for him several times before. It might be because of this. Meanwhile, the southern sect's martial arts master suddenly stood up, walked to the entrance of the hall, and looked in the direction of the god burial plains. He said softly, "They will be here soon." Yi Xian stood up, walked to the entrance of the hall, and looked in the direction of the god burial plains as well. The god burial plains. There weren't many people attacking the god burial plains this time, only 100. However, all of them had been carefully selected. Amongst them there were 10 Dao Validation Realm experts, 30 Dao Realm experts, and the weakest amongst them was at the Saint Realm. This lineup could be said to be very strong. Moreover, the person in the lead was Li Qian. This time their target was the Earthen Stronghold. The Earthen Stronghold was one of the strongholds of the God Burial Plains. The Star-Lord and the other 3 were waiting in battle formation in midair. So long as the top-rate experts of the God Burial Plains attacked, they would stop them. Below them, Li Qian, who was in the lead, looked at the Earthen Stronghold that had appeared in the distance, and his expression became slightly ferocious. Everyone, the Star Lord has ordered that you can take anything within the God Burial Plains after you enter the God Burial Plains. Everyone instantly felt as if they'd been injected with stimulants and their blood boiled. What did they come here for? Naturally, it was for benefits. To protect the common people of the world. No. Most of the time, the more powerful a person was, the more selfish they were because they only lived for themselves. The God Burial Plains was an unknown country and it was hostile to the three desolate worlds. Once the God Burial Plains were destroyed, then all the wealth within the God Burial Plains would belong to them. Great rewards were bound to attract brave men. It didn't take long for the group to arrive before the earthen stronghold. At this moment, the gates of the stronghold suddenly opened, and a man with a spear stood before the gates. The man looked at Li Qian and the others who were charging at him with an expressionless face. Li Qian's expression was ferocious. Kill. As soon as he spoke, he leaped up and charged directly towards the man with the spear. However, at the instant he charged out, shrill cries suddenly resounded from behind him. Li Qian's expression changed drastically. He turned around and behind him 100 people fell one by one. After 10 breaths of time, there were 100 more corpses on the ground in front of him. Moreover, it was 20 men in black who had attacked him with sickles in their hands. These 20 people stood there silently like gods of death. Li Qian's mind went blank. Were they all gone just like that? In the void, the expressions of the Star Lord and the others also became extremely solemn. This was an instant kill. Were the 20 people below the God Burial Plains most elite soldiers? Below, the man with the spear slowly walked towards Li Qian. Li Qian came to his senses and looked at the man with the spear. You guys were prepared. Did Yi Xian inform you? The man with the spear did not reply to Li Qian. He suddenly charged forward and a powerful force shot directly towards Li Qian. Li Qian's expression turned ferocious as he charged forward and punched out. Boom. Almost instantly both of them retreated at the same time. As the deputy commander of the Divine Lord, Li Qian's strength was naturally unquestionable. After Li Qian stopped, he turned and ran. The men in black wanted to give chase, but the man with the spear shook his head. No need. As he spoke, he glanced at the corpses on the ground. Send the heads of these people to the foot of the Great Wall. Yes, Commander, you. Soon, 100 bloody heads were piled up at the foot of the Great Wall. After Li Qian returned to the Great Wall, he looked at the myriad mountain hall and roared, Yi Xian, get out here. A flying sword suddenly flew out from the myriad mountain hall. The next moment, boom, Li Qian was directly pushed back 100 feet by this sword. At the same time, one of his arms flew off. This was because this flying sword was the executing heaven sword. At this moment, Yi Xian appeared in front of Li Qian. He walked towards Li Qian, the executing heaven sword hovering above his head. Li Qian looked at Yi Xian in shock and anger. Yi Xian, did you betray us? Yi Xian shook his head. You're so stupid. How did you become the commander of the Divine Lord? Li Qian glared at Yi Xian angrily. Where is the Divine Lord? As soon as his voice fell, a dozen experts in golden armor suddenly appeared around Yi Xian. Every one of them was a Dao validation expert and their auras were extremely powerful. Li Qian said angrily, Yi Xian, the divine race was clearly prepared. If you hadn't tipped them off, how could they have known that we were going to attack them? Our 100 experts were all slaughtered. Yi Xian, doesn't your conscience hurt? The moment this was said, there was an uproar. This Yi Xian colluded with the divine nation? For a moment, all the experts present looked at Yi Xian with unfriendly expressions. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Commander Li, why did you come back alive when all 100 experts died? Li Qian said angrily, I escaped. Yi Xian said seriously, the divine nation actually let you escape. It seems like your relationship with the divine nation isn't ordinary. Li Qian suddenly pointed at Yi Xian angrily. Kill him. As soon as he said that, the divine Dao soldiers were about to attack. At this moment, the Southern Sect Martial Master appeared in front of Yi Xian. He glanced at Li Qian. He was with me the whole time and didn't tip off. Li Qian said in a deep voice, Martial Master, there's no one else but him. It must be him. The Southern Sect Martial Master suddenly waved his right hand. Boom. A powerful force suddenly enveloped Li Qian. In an instant, Li Qian's legs bent and he knelt down. Li Qian looked at the Southern Sect Martial Master in disbelief. The latter said indifferently, "Are you going to say that I colluded with the divine nation?" Li Qian didn't dare to speak. He only looked at Yi Xian with resentment. At this moment the Star Lord, Perfected Chu and the others appeared. Perfected Chu glanced at Yi Xian and Li Qian. Then he said, "There's something fishy about this." As he said that he looked at Yi Xian. "Little friend Yi, you went to the divine nation and they found you. Not only did they not capture you but they also told you so many secrets of the divine nation. You have to explain this." Yi Xian smiled. "How can I explain? You wouldn't believe me anyway, would you?" Perfected Chu's face instantly darkened. At this moment the Star Lord suddenly said, "City Lord Yi, this concerns the lives of countless people. If you don't explain, don't blame us for being impolite." "What's there to explain?" Not far away Li Qian, who was still kneeling, suddenly said angrily, "This person must have colluded with the divine nation. If we let him live, he will definitely stab us in the back when we fight with the divine nation in the future. This person must." At this moment Yi Xian suddenly slashed with his sword. Li Qian's head instantly flew out. Because Li Qian and Yi Xian were too close, and no one expected Yi Xian to suddenly kill someone, the Star Lord and the others didn't have time to stop him. Yi Xian put away his sword and looked at Li Qian's head that was rolling on the ground. "In your next life you must remember the reason for this life's death. Talking too much." Li Qian was speechless. Chapter 6:11. If someone were to slander you, you had two choices. First, find evidence, argue with him and prove your innocence. If he still did not believe you, he would still slander you. The second option, make him shut up forever. That way he can't slander you anymore. Yi Xian chose the first one. But the other party did not believe him. Thus he chose the second one. Now it was no longer important whether the other party believed him or not. Everyone was looking at Yi Xian. They did not expect that Yi Xian would suddenly kill someone, and the person he killed was a deputy commander of the Divine Dao soldiers. Not only that, Yi Xian used one sword soul fixation, so Li Qian's soul was killed by him. Could be said that Li Qian had completely disappeared from this time. Not far away the planet lord stared at Yi Xian. "Do you really think that no one in this world can deal with you?" Yi Xian did not care about the planet lord, but looked at Perfected Chu. "Perfected Chu, let's reason things out." Hearing this, everyone's expression suddenly became strange. Reason things out after killing someone? Why not go to the heavens? At the side the planet lord was so angry that he laughed. "Yi Xian, oh Yi Xian. Do you think that everyone in this world is stupid?" As he spoke he was about to make a move. At this moment Perfected Chu suddenly said, "Let him reason things out." The planet lord looked at Perfected Chu and Perfected Chu said indifferently, "He is only at the law-controlling realm, but what about you, planet lord? Is it glory to win?" Status. The planet lord was silent. His current status was that of the planet lord. If he fought with Yi Xian alone, it would be extremely disadvantageous to him. But to Yi Xian it was advantageous, extremely advantageous. Thinking of this, the planet lord looked coldly at Yi Xian and no longer spoke. Perfected Chu looked at Yi Xian. "Didn't you want to reason things out? Say it." Yi Xian said, "Perfected Chu, did I say anything about God Nation's strength when I came back?" Perfected Chu nodded. Yi Xian said, "But Commander Li Qian, Commander Chu Kuang and the Celestial Lord don't believe me. The three of them said that the Celestial race is using the Celestial race's name to intimidate us. Are they the ones who said this?" Perfected Chu was silent. Yi Xian continued, "I risked my life to gather information, but what did I get in return? It was their suspicions, saying that I colluded with the divine nations. If I really colluded with God Nation, why would I come back?" At this point he looked at the Celestial Lord. "Celestial Lord, I told you that Scandinavia is strong, but you said that I affected the morale of the army. If I said that Scandinavia is very weak, would you say that I'm numbing you, making you look down on Scandinavia?" The Star Lord stared at Yi Xian. "What we are discussing now is why God Nation let you go." Yi Xian laughed, then took out the space stone. "I used this to escape. Is there a problem?" The Star Lord asked again, "Why did they tell you so many secrets?" Yi Xian said, "It was a woman called Nan Gongwan who told me. She seems to be a kingdom knight in Scandinavia. You are so powerful, why don't you ask her? Ask her why she told me so many secrets." The Star Lord was expressionless. "You don't want to say?" Yi Xian laughed. "Star Lord, look at you. I asked you and your Order Alliance to go to Scandinavia, But you didn't dare to go. I went, but when I came back you didn't believe me. Are you trying to be cheap? The Star Lord suddenly disappeared. Not far away, the southern sex martial artist was about to make a move, but Perfected Chu's voice suddenly sounded in his mind. This kid is too arrogant. Let the Star Lord suppress his arrogance, or else he won't be easy to make use of. The southern sex martial artist hesitated, but at this moment Yi Xian was suddenly sent flying. He flew for hundreds of feet. Just as Yi Xian stopped, the Star Lord suddenly punched through the air. Boom! The space in front of Yi Xian instantly exploded, and a powerful force blasted towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian's expression turned sinister as he drew his sword and slashed. As the sword slashed down, the force was directly shattered by the sword. However, Yi Xian was still sent flying again. Because that force was too strong. Hundreds of feet away, the moment Yi Xian landed on the ground beneath him directly cracked. At this moment, a monstrous pressure pressed down on Yi Xian like a mountain. Boom! The ground around Yi Xian instantly exploded. At the same time, Yi Xian's legs directly bent and he almost knelt down. Not far away, the Star Lord was about to make another move, but at this moment, a figure suddenly shot towards the Star Lord. The one who made a move was Wuxia. The Star Lord coldly looked at Wuxia and flicked his sleeves. Boom! Wuxia's entire body was instantly blasted hundreds of feet away. In the air, he continuously spat out blood. It was incomparably shocking. The Star Lord didn't care about Wuxia. He looked at the nearby Yi Xian, and that pressure was still shrouding Yi Xian. Yi Xian's right foot fiercely stomped, the ground trembled and a powerful sword aura suddenly rushed up. However, as the Star Lord lightly pressed down with his right hand, that sword aura instantly disappeared without a trace. The Star Lord slowly walked towards Yi Xian. With every step he took, the pressure above Yi Xian's head would become a little stronger. The Star Lord looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, you have backbone and guts, but what use is that? Without strength, the so-called backbone and guts are nothing but a joke. Now if you are willing to kneel down, I can spare your life. Kneel down. These words struck the heart. If a swordsman knelt down, would he still be a swordsman? This Star Lord wanted to directly break Yi Xian's mental state. Not far away, Yi Xian sneered, Star Lord, have you eaten too much tea? As his voice faded, he suddenly held his sword with both hands and slashed forward. With one slash, the pressure above his head was instantly cut open. However, in the next moment that pressure gathered again and it was much stronger than before. The Star Lord once again took a step forward. Kneel down. As his voice faded, a powerful pressure suddenly swept out from his body. Very quickly, this pressure directly reached Yi Xian's body. At this moment, the bones in Yi Xian's body immediately made a kacha sound. At the same time, Yi Xian's legs became more and more bent. The Star Lord didn't directly kill Yi Xian, because he felt that directly killing Yi Xian would be too easy on Yi Xian. If he made Yi Xian kneel down in front of everyone, a proud person like Yi Xian would definitely be in great pain. Thinking of this, an inexplicable smile appeared on the Star Lord's face. At this moment, a figure suddenly shot towards the Star Lord. The one who attacked was still Wuxia. At this moment, Wuxia's body emitted a powerful bloodline power. Obviously, he had also used his trump card. The Star Lord stopped and looked at Wuxia. In the next moment, his right hand lightly pressed forward. Boom! A powerful force forced Wuxia to stop. In the next moment, the Star Lord's left hand flew through the air. A punch blasted out. Boom! The space around Wuxia violently trembled. Immediately, Wuxia spat out a mouthful of blood and his entire body flew out. His entire body heavily smashed onto the ground, as if his entire body had fallen apart. Wuxia looked at the sky, blood continuously flowing out of his mouth. The Star Lord looked at Yi Xian. In the next moment, his right hand lightly lifted up and then pressed down. Boom! The place where Yi Xian was directly collapsed, but Yi Xian was still standing. Even though blood was gushing out of the corner of his mouth like a fountain, he still didn't kneel down. Not far away, the southern sex martial artist looked at Perfected Chu. Is that enough? Perfected Chu was expressionless. If this person doesn't put away his pride, how can he become the sword in our hands? The southern sex martial artist was about to speak, but at this moment Perfected Chu said, Brother Wu, just watch carefully. Don't let an outsider affect our friendship. As he spoke, he looked not far away. At this moment the Star Lord was already 20 feet away from Zhou Xian, and a powerful pressure was continuously crushing towards Zhou Xian. A space Dao Law suddenly appeared between Zhou Xian's eyebrows. In the next moment the space in front of him began to shrink layer by layer, and then formed a thick spatial barrier. The Star Lord was expressionless. He raised his hand and slapped. Boom! The space around Zhou Xian instantly collapsed. In an instant Zhou Xian was in a pitch-black spatial black hole, and the pressure was still pressing down on Zhou Xian. Moreover, it was even stronger than before. Zhou Xian gritted his teeth tightly, and blood was still flowing out of the corner of his mouth. The Star Lord looked coldly at Zhou Xian. He was about to attack again, but at this moment, Wuxia suddenly stood up. In the next moment he suddenly put his hands together and then he pointed at the distant Star Lord through the air. Break through. As soon as he spoke, the space in front of the Star Lord exploded like a volcanic eruption, and a powerful force instantly drowned the Star Lord. At this moment, the sound of a sword suddenly resounded in the distance, and soon numerous flying swords directly slashed towards the Star Lord. At this moment, a powerful force suddenly erupted from where the Star Lord stood, and in an instant the space within a radius of tens of thousands of feet shook violently. Boom! Zhou Xian's flying swords instantly disappeared, and at this moment, a powerful force suddenly flashed across the field. Not far away, Wuxia's pupils shrank, and his arms abruptly blocked in front of him. Boom! A powerful force swept over and Wuxia was instantly blasted away. Just as he landed on the ground, both his arms were instantly shattered. At the same time he directly spat out a mouthful of blood. Wuxia looked at the horizon and fresh blood flowed out of his mouth like spring water. This time he really couldn't stand up. The Star Lord coldly glanced at Wuxia and then looked at Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian, are you going to kneel or not? Kneel? Zhou Xian suddenly laughed sinisterly. In the next moment all the blood in his body began to boil, and at the same time, the executing heaven sword in his hand began to violently tremble. Seeing this scene, the Star Lord instantly narrowed his eyes. At this moment Zhou Xian suddenly raised his head and looked at the distant Star Lord. At this moment his eyes were blood red and his expression was incomparably sinister. I, Zhou Xian, have walked from Qingqing until now. I've been shameless, I've cried for my sister, but I've never been afraid. If my head falls off, it'll just be a bowl-sized scar. Kill me. Come on. As his voice fell, boom, a powerful aura suddenly swept out from Zhou Xian's body. Under everyone's gaze, Zhou Xian's entire body began to violently tremble. Seeing this scene, everyone's expression instantly changed. Self-destruct. Zhou Xian was going to self-destruct. And at the moment he chose to self-destruct, his sword intent suddenly soared into the sky. This sword intent directly shattered the Star Lord's aura. Transcendent Sword Saint. However, it was too late. Zhou Xian's body began to burn. At this moment, in an unknown starry sky, a woman in a plain dress suddenly stopped. In the next moment, her calm expression suddenly changed, and there was a trace of panic in her sinister expression. No. As her voice fell, thousands of sword auras suddenly appeared in this starry sky. In an instant, the entire starry sky was directly annihilated and shattered. P.S. Is there a female tycoon or someone who knows a female tycoon who wants to provide for someone? I'm tired of typing every day. I don't want to struggle anymore. I know all 36 yin yang skills. Life is too difficult, I want to change it. I want to heroically say the words that have been hidden in my heart for a long time. I, Luan, don't need monthly votes. Is there anyone? If not, I'll ask again tomorrow. Chapter 6:12. Life and Death. Zhou Xian naturally wanted to live. However, he would not choose to live in humiliation. If someone wanted him to be a dog, he would rather die than obey. Self-destruct. If he could not live well, then he would choose to die a glorious death. Zhou Xian's choice to self-destruct shocked everyone present, including the Astral Lord. He did not expect Zhou Xian to choose to self-destruct. Was he really not afraid of death? The Astral Lord stared at Zhou Xian, whose aura was rising rapidly. At this moment his eyes were filled with killing intent. A person like Zhou Xian was too terrifying. He must die. That was what he was thinking now. Fortunately, Zhou Xian was about to die. Just as the powerful force in Zhou Xian's body was about to explode, a hand suddenly pressed on Zhou Xian's shoulder. In the next moment, the powerful and violent aura in Yi Xian's body was directly suppressed. The one who made a move was the Southern Sect's martial master. In the end, he still chose to make a move. Perfected Master Chu, the Astral Lord, and the Monster King all looked at the Southern Sect's martial master. The latter said softly, "Too much." As his voice fell, his right hand once again gently pressed down on Yi Xian's forehead. Soon, the blood in Yi Xian's body gradually calmed down. Seeing this scene, Perfected Master Chu and the Astral Lord's expressions changed slightly. Especially Perfected Master Chu, he had suppressed Yi Xian's bloodline power. However, at that time he could not do it alone and had to rely on Tang Yan's help to suppress it. But now, the Southern Sect's martial master actually suppressed Yi Xian's bloodline power by himself. This strength, Perfected Master Chu took a deep look at the Southern Sect's martial master. There was a trace of wariness in the depths of his eyes. The Southern Sect's martial master ignored the people around him and said, "Leave these two to me." After saying that, he directly left with Yi Xian and Immerse. Not far away, the Astral Lord said in a deep voice, "Yi Xian can't be left alive." Tang Yan suddenly said, "It's best if we don't have any internal strife right now." Saying that, he glanced at the Star Lord and Perfected Chu. "The two of you don't forget we still have an even greater enemy." With that, he turned around and left. The Monster King nodded as well. "What we need to do now is to fight against the Divine Nation. This Divine Nation is much stronger than we imagined. So, I suggest that more experts come here and fight against the Divine Nation with us." Daoist Chu nodded slightly. "Yes. Of course, I also hope that Brother Demon King can bring more experts from the demon race here." The Demon King nodded. "Sure." Perfected Master Chu nodded. Without saying anything else, he turned around and left. On the spot, the Star Lord was expressionless. Extraordinary Sword Saint. In that instant, Yi Xian actually broke through and became a transcendent sword saint. If Yi Xian's realm was a little higher and he was also a transcendent sword saint, he might not be able to do anything to him. In the same place, the Star Lord remained silent for a long time before finally turning around and leaving. On a certain mountain, Yi Xian and Immerse lay quietly on the ground. In front of them were the Southern Sect's martial master and Zhao Mu. From time to time, Zhao Mu would look at Yi Xian with an unfriendly expression. At this moment, the Southern Sect's martial master suddenly said, "Girl, go to the heaven-treading peak and get some elixirs for them. Tell them that I asked you to go." He could not leave Yi Xian and Immerse now because once he left, these two little fellows might lose their lives. Zhao Mu glanced at Yi Xian before turning around and leaving. After Zhao Mu left, Tang Yan suddenly appeared. He glanced at the Southern Sect's martial master. He smiled and said, "Brother Wu, you have offended the Star Lord and Perfected Chu." The Southern Sect's martial master said softly, "They have indeed gone too far." Speaking of this, he looked at Tang Yan. "You should know that this little fellow did not lie before. The divine race is much stronger than we imagined." Tang Yan said softly, "The Star Lord is afraid." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. "He is so young, but his strength is so strong. The Star Lord is afraid that he will continue to grow. If he continues to grow, in a few years at most, even us old fellows will not be able to do anything to him. And at that time, with this little fellow's personality, he will definitely not let the Order Alliance off. In fact, if it was him, he would also be afraid. Yi Xian's growth was too fast." At this moment, Xiao Linger suddenly appeared beside Yi Xian. The Southern Sect's martial master and Tang Yan's gaze immediately fell on Xiao Linger. Xiao Linger looked at the two of them warily. Then, under their shocked gazes, she directly brought the unconscious Yi Xian into the prison pagoda. But very quickly, she appeared in front of the two old men again. In her arms, she carried a large pile of spirit fruits. She placed the spirit fruits in front of the two of them and pointed at Immerse, who was lying on the ground not far away. Then she turned around and disappeared. The two of them. A moment later, Tang Yan suddenly said, "Brother Martial Master, are you not tempted by that treasure?" The Southern Sect's martial master smiled and said, "Brother Tang, what did you rely on to cultivate to this level?" Tang Yan was silent. The Southern Sect's martial master said again, "Treasures and whatnot are naturally important. But if the focus is completely on treasures, then it is a bit like putting the cart before the horse." Tang Yan said softly, "Brother Martial Master's mentality? I am not as good as you." The Southern Sect's martial master turned to look at the far end and said softly, Brother Tang Yen, has your Tang family's iron cavalry arrived? Tang Yen nodded. Against God Nation, how would we dare to underestimate them? Not only our Tang family but the Order Alliance and the Demon Race have also sent out their elites. This time if we win. At this point he did not continue. Not far away, the Southern Sect's martial master sighed softly and did not say anything in the end. At this moment Tang Yen said again, Brother Martial Master, this Zhou Xian is an unstable factor. If you do not give them a good explanation, I am afraid it will not do. The Southern Sect's martial master said softly, I will handle his matter. Tang Yen nodded and did not say anything else. He turned around and left. Prison Pagoda. Zhou Xian was lying on the ground and Xiao Linger was feeding him spirit fruits. After eating more than 10 spirit fruits, Zhou Xian's pale face gradually improved. Seeing this, Xiao Linger was overjoyed and quickly fed Zhou Xian a few more spirit fruits. About half an hour later, Zhou Xian's consciousness recovered a little and he slowly opened his eyes. Xiao Linger quickly sat beside Zhou Xian's head and blinked. You're awake? Zhou Xian smiled. Yes. Alright, where's my brother? Xiao Linger said, he is outside. But I gave him a lot of spirit fruits. Zhou Xian slowly sat up and gently rubbed Xiao Linger. Thank you. With that he was about to leave the prison pagoda. At this time, Xiao Linger suddenly pulled his sleeve. Zhou Xian turned to look at Xiao Linger. Xiao Linger looked at him and softly said, You will be fine, okay? I'm afraid. Afraid. From Qingzhou until now, unknowingly, she had already regarded Zhou Xian as the closest person to her. Hearing Xiao Linger's words, Zhou Xian was touched. He gently rubbed Xiao Linger's head and smiled. Don't worry, Big Brother will definitely protect himself in the future. Xiao Linger nodded. Zhou Xian smiled and left the prison pagoda. Outside, Zhou Xian saw the Southern Sect's martial master Immerse and Zhao Mu. Immerse was leaning on a rock looking very weak. Zhou Xian walked to Immerse. Are you okay? Immerse shook his head. I won't die yet. Zhou Xian nodded slightly. He then turned to the Southern Sect's martial master and bowed respectfully. Thank you, Senior. The Southern Sect's martial master looked at Zhou Xian and said in a deep voice, Little guy, promise me one thing. Zhou Xian said, Senior, please say it. The Southern Sect's martial master said, Don't seek revenge yet. Zhou Xian was silent. The Southern Sect's martial master said, Now that we are facing a great enemy, we really can't afford internal strife. Moreover, if you seek revenge on the Star Lord now, not only will you not win, you will also lose your life for nothing. Saying this, he walked to Zhou Xian's side and lightly patted Zhou Xian's shoulder. It's not that you can't be frivolous. It's not a bad thing to be young and hot-blooded. However, you have to act according to your capabilities. If you force something that you can't do, you may harm yourself and others. The old man doesn't want you to give up on revenge. He just hopes that you won't do anything during this period of time. After everything is over, if you are still alive, the old man won't stop you from doing whatever you want. How about it? Zhou Xian was silent for a moment and nodded. The Southern Sect's martial master smiled slightly. As if he thought of something, he asked again, When you were in God Nation, what kind of country was it? Zhou Xian thought for a moment and said, Much better than here. The Southern Sect's martial master said softly, Much better? Zhou Xian nodded. The most important thing is that they are united. In God Nation, the God Lord is the most powerful. That God Lord can issue a decree and no one dares to disobey it. Moreover, I don't know the strength of those forces in their country, but they shouldn't be weak. The Southern Sect's martial master was silent. Zhou Xian said again, Senior, you must be careful. The Southern Sect's martial master nodded. Of course, we won't underestimate them. Zhou Xian wanted to say something but hesitated. The Southern Sect's martial master smiled. You want to say that we don't have any chance of winning, right? Zhou Xian nodded. The Southern Sect's martial master smiled. Don't worry. We also have a trump card that no one knows about. Zhou Xian nodded and didn't say anything else. He wasn't afraid that they would lose. To him, whether they lost or not had nothing to do with him. The Southern Sect's martial master suddenly said, During this period of time, you two stay here temporarily. Remember, don't go out. Some of the rumors outside aren't good for you too. Zhou Xian smiled. Is it the Order Alliance that says that I, Zhou Xian, have betrayed them and sought refuge with God Nation? The Southern Sect's martial master nodded. Zhou Xian smiled and didn't say anything. The Southern Sect's martial master was about to speak, but at this moment he suddenly turned his head and looked into the distance. In the distant sky, an old man was walking in the air. In the old man's hand there was a golden god's decree. God Nation's expert. Soon the old man arrived outside the city gate. He looked down and opened the god's decree, his face expressionless. The heavens have the virtue of cherishing life. I don't want blood to flow like a river. From now on, anyone who is willing to surrender will be my people. Those who don't surrender will die. Countless voices suddenly sounded from below. Get lost. God Nation? What a joke. You want us to surrender? What a joke. God Nation's trash. I would rather die than surrender. God Nation's destruction. God Nation's destruction. Chapter 6:13. No surrender. Above the Great Wall, the old man from God Nation looked down at the countless people below, his face expressionless. At this time the Star Lord suddenly appeared not far from the old man. The old man looked at the Star Lord. Star Lord, what do you think? The Star Lord said calmly, what do you think? The old man nodded slightly. Her Majesty said. She can kill, but she can also be merciful. Unfortunately, you gave up her mercy. After saying that, he turned and left. In the air, the Star Lord looked at the old man in the distance with a calm expression. No one knew what he was thinking. Surrender? How could they surrender? Now the three desolate worlds were controlled by the Monster Race, the Order Alliance and the Tang Clan. The main resources of these three desolate worlds were controlled by them. Surrendering meant giving up these benefits. Not only did they have to give up these benefits, but they also had to surrender to others. How could they give up? They would not give up. This time there was only one battle. Fight at all costs. After a moment the Star Lord turned and left. Below, countless people were still clamoring. In the distance on a mountain, Zhou Xian and Wuxia looked at the clamoring crowd below. Zhou Xian said softly, these people are all mouthy emperors. Wuxia nodded slightly. There will always be some people who think they are very powerful, but when faced with a real problem they are actually very timid. Zhou Xian smiled. You have to understand. After all, they can't do anything other than spitting with their mouths. Wuxia looked at Zhou Xian. Brother Yi, what do you plan to do next? Zhou Xian said softly. Keep a low profile, wait and see what happens. Wuxia nodded. Understood. You must be planning something bad again. Zhou Xian. Wuxia looked at the end of the horizon. God Nation, how strong is it? Zhou Xian looked in the direction of God Nation and said softly, I don't know. But it has nothing to do with us anymore. Let's go and cultivate. Soon the two left. God Nation Tumu Fort. On this day 3,000 soldiers were gathered in front of the rear gate of the Tumu Fort. Their leader was Commander Yu. On both sides of Commander Yu, there were 30 black-clothed men wielding sickles. Everyone was looking into the distance. Soon at the end of the city gate, a golden dragon suddenly appeared. The golden dragon was thousands of feet long and covered the sky. The moment it appeared, a powerful dragon aura suddenly appeared in the world. The golden dragon. The final golden dragon of the entire Chaosverse. On the head of the golden dragon stood a little girl. The little girl wore a tight-fitting white robe and a sheathed sword hung from her waist. She stood on the golden dragon's head with an indifferent gaze. Behind the little girl stood two white-haired old men. Each of them held a sword in their hands. Nangongwan was also beside the little girl, but she was a little far away from her. What was worth mentioning was that there was a young man and a woman standing about 3 meters to the right of the little girl. The young man was handsome and wore a long black robe. His right hand was behind his back and in his hand was a scroll. Beside the young man was a woman wearing a long dark green dress with several lotus leaves embroidered on it. In the woman's hand was a long dark green flute. On the ground below the dragon, a group of cavalrymen slowly walked toward Tumu Fort. There were 1,000 of them, all wearing golden armor and wielding golden spears. They were all Dao validation experts. Beneath them were Windchaser cults that had reached the creation realm. The Imperial Guard. This was the Divine Nation's Divine Lord's personal guard, also known as the Divine Guard. Each of them had been carefully selected and answered only to the Divine Lord of the Divine Nation. The 1,000 cavalrymen all had the same aura, and although there were only 1,000 of them, they had the aura of a magnificent army. And behind the 1,000 cavalrymen there were 3 armies. The Paladin Order. The Paladin Order had a total of 3,000 people, and they were led by 3 captains. These captains answered only to the Divine Lord of the Divine Nation. And behind these 3,000 people there was another army. There were 9 armies, and each army had 10,000 people. They were the elites of the elites. Their individual strength might not be as strong as the Paladin Order or the Imperial Guard, but they cultivated military formations. With 10,000 people as one, they could easily slay a Dao realm expert. With 90,000 people as one, they could easily slay a Tendo expert. And all of these armies answered only to the Divine Lord. Soon the dragon arrived above Tumu Fort. Below, Commander Yu and the others inside the fort all knelt on one knee. On the dragon, the little girl looked down and gently pointed her finger upward. Commander Yu and the others stood up, but they still bowed. The little girl slowly walked down from the dragon, followed by the 2 old men holding swords, followed by the man and woman, and then Nangong Wan. The little girl entered Tumu Fort. At this time, Commander Yu hurriedly came to the little girl's side. "Your Majesty, everyone in the city has been moved to Nanshan City, 1,000 miles away." The little girl nodded. Nangong. Nangong Wan walked to the little girl's side and bowed slightly. "Your Majesty." The little girl looked in the direction of the Great Wall. "Who is the strongest person on the plains?" Nangong Wan thought for a moment, then said, "The known ones are the Star Master Tang Yen, the Demon King of the Demon Clan, the Martial Master of the Southern Sect, Perfected Chu, and the Divine Lord Commander Yi Zhantian." The little girl said softly, "What about the unknown ones?" Nangong Wan said, "The ones we don't know are Zhou Yafu, who suddenly disappeared from the Martial Arts Institute, Mu Nanji, the Tang Clan's patriarch, Jian Nanshan, the Sword Faction's sect master from 2,500 years ago, Nanming, Demon King of the Demon Clan, who has a half-demon body, and Zhan Wushuang, who is proficient in both saber and sword." The little girl nodded slightly and continued forward. "What about the younger generation?" Nangong Wan said, "The younger generation includes the little teacher, who ranks first on the low rank. His background is unknown, but his identity is unknown. There is also the 7th Tang, who ranks second on the low rank. He does not like to fight and left the Tang clan to travel. Other than these 2, there is the disciple of the Southern Sect Martial Master Zhao Mu, and the disciple of Perfected Chu Tainyo." When she spoke up to hear, she paused slightly and continued. "Besides these few people, there are 3 more. There are the martial institutions in Lanxiu, who possesses the martial god physique, Lian Wanli, and the Mok clan Zemosia." The little girl suddenly said, "What about Yi Xian?" Nangong Wan was silent. The little girl said, "What is it?" Nangong Wan said in a low voice, "I don't know how to describe his strength." The little girl said, "Then just say it." Nangong Wan nodded. "This person is a bit strange. His strength has little to do with his level, so you can't measure his strength by level. His combat strength is also sometimes strong, sometimes weak." The little girl's eyes showed a hint of interest. "Tell me." Nangong Wan said, "Normally, although his combat strength is strong, it is not heaven-defying. However, when he is angry, his combat strength will increase unreasonably. Moreover, he has a pile of treasures on him. Not only does he have a sword that surpasses the Dao realm, but he also has the soul-suppressing sword from the Nether race. Not only that, but he also has the Divine King's throne and the Divine King's sword. Other than that, he also has a treasure from the 5th dimension." The little girl said softly, "Is it the Black Tower that appeared in my Divine Kingdom?" Nangong Wan nodded, "Yes." The little girl said, "So his background is not simple?" Nangong Wan said in a low voice, "He is not simple. However, this person is arrogant and does not tolerate any grievances. Thus, his relationship with the forces in the West is not very good. Especially the Order Alliance, they want him dead." The little girl nodded and stopped. At this time they had arrived at the God Burial Plains. In front of them was the Great Wall. At this moment the Great Wall was filled with people. They were all cultivators from the barren worlds. When they saw the armies of the Divine Kingdom, everyone fell silent. This was the army of the Divine Kingdom. This was especially true for the 1,000 divine guards at the front. They stood there like an army of thousands of men and horses, giving off a strong sense of oppression. Solemn. At this moment, the expressions of all the experts on the Great Wall became solemn. The Divine Kingdom was much stronger than they had imagined. The Planet Lord and the other 4 were also extremely solemn. At this moment they realized that Yi Xian did not lie to them. But fortunately, if the divine kingdom was only this strong, they still had a good chance of winning. After all, they were great forces that had existed for thousands of years. How could they not have a trump card? At this time the planet lord appeared in front of the little girl. The planet lord glanced at the little girl, then his eyes fell on the two elders behind the little girl. When he saw the two, although the planet lord's expression did not change, his heart was extremely solemn. Unfathomable. This was the feeling that the two elders gave him. The planet lord withdrew his gaze and looked at the little girl. Your divine kingdom starting this war will only cause both sides to suffer. You. Meanwhile, the little girl spoke abruptly. Both of you aren't qualified to cause both sides to suffer. The planet lord's expression instantly became unsightly, and he was about to speak when the little girl spoke abruptly. Let the younger generation play with us for now. As soon as she finished speaking, a young man in white clothes suddenly appeared in front of the little girl. He bowed slightly to the little girl, and then he walked over to the entrance of the Great Wall. He gazed at the experts on the Great Wall. I'm the Divine Kingdom's junior master of the Boundless Sect, Lin Xiaobai. Please provide me with your guidance. Please provide me with your guidance. A man suddenly leaped off the wall. I'll play with you. Suddenly Lin Xiaobai vanished. Bang. The others hadn't even reacted when the man had been transformed into a pile of mush. Everyone's expressions instantly became solemn when they witnessed this scene. The Dao Mastery Realm. The young man before them was actually an expert at the Dao Mastery Realm. Lin Xiaobai looked up at the experts on the Great Wall. Don't be so weak. Please respect me. Thank you. Meanwhile, a young man suddenly descended in front of Lin Xiaobai. Someone instantly exclaimed with surprise when they saw this young man. It's Mo Yunshan, who's ranked 6th on the Dao rankings. The 6th on the Dao rankings. Mo Yunshan gazed at Lin Xiaobai. Please provide me with your guidance. Lin Xiaobai nodded. Please be careful. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished. In an instant, a powerful force swept towards Mo Yunshan like a storm, and the space in its path collapsed inch by inch. Mo Yunshan's expression changed drastically. He didn't dare act carelessly in the slightest, and a spear suddenly tore through the air and stabbed forward. Bang! As soon as the two forces collided, Mo Yunshan was instantly blasted back, and a figure flashed by while he was retreating. In the next moment, bang! Mo Yunshan's figure was blasted flying and smashed against the Great Wall. Bang! Mo Yunshan's body instantly exploded apart while blood sprayed into the surroundings. Lin Xiaobai patted the dust on his chest lightly, and then he gazed at the Great Wall. Ask the first on the Dao rankings to step forward. All the spectators were speechless. P.S. Even though there were only 2 updates, my love for all of you hasn't lessened at all. I still love all of you regardless of whether you give me monthly passes or not. My love for all of you is extremely pure and true. What about all of you? Do all of you feel the same way towards me? Do all of you still love me no matter how much more I get? Do you still give me monthly passes? Think so. Because love is mutual. Love shouldn't be measured by monthly passes and updates. Do all of you think I'm right? Chapter 6:14. Number 1 on the low rank. At this moment, everyone on the Great Wall was silent. Mo Yunshan, number 7 on the low rank, couldn't even last 2 moves. And this Lin Xiaobai directly challenged the little teacher who was number 1 on the low rank. Somewhere Zhao Mu was about to go down, but someone grabbed her arm. It was Yi Xian. Zhao Mu looked at Yi Xian with an unfriendly expression. Yi Xian said in a low voice, that person isn't the strongest among the younger generation of the God Nation. As he spoke, he pointed at the man and woman behind the little girl in the distance. Do you see those two? Zhao Mu looked at the man and woman. At this moment, the man and woman seemed to sense something and suddenly looked up at the two. The lady only took a glance before withdrawing her gaze, while the man smiled as if he was greeting her. Yi Xian said in a low voice, what do you think of these two? Zhao Mu looked at Yi Xian coldly. Yi Xian looked puzzled. Miss Zhao, I told you to look at them. Why are you looking at me? Am I that good looking? Zhao Mu glanced at Yi Xian's hand. At this moment his hand was still holding on to her arm. Yi Xian was stunned, then he smiled and let go of Zhao Mu's hand. Sorry, I didn't do it on purpose. You know that I'm not that kind of person. Zhao Mu stared at Yi Xian with a sharp gaze. Xian quickly changed the topic. He looked down and said, Miss Zhao, what do you think of those two? Zhao Mu didn't say anything. She pointed at Xian and then at Lin Xiaobai. Obviously she was asking Xian to fight. Xian shook his head. No, I won't fight. Zhao Mu frowned. Xian said in a low voice, I was injured by the Star Lord. My butt still hurts so I can't fight. Zhao Mu was speechless. Below the wall, Lin Xiaobai saw that no one came out. He looked up at the people on the wall. To one. At this moment, a burly youth suddenly landed in front of Lin Xiaobai. Daoist Master Chu's disciple Iron Bull. And he was ranked 4th on the law rank. Iron Bull looked at Lin Xiaobai. Are you the strongest in God Nation? The strongest in God Nation? Lin Xiaobai shook his head and smiled. This brother, please don't speak nonsense. I will be laughed at. Iron Bull frowned. You're not the strongest? Lin Xiaobai smiled and said, No. Iron Bull asked, Then who is the strongest? Lin Xiaobai turned around and glanced at the man and woman behind the God Nation's divine master. His eyes were filled with respect and a tinge of helplessness. Those two were the most outstanding geniuses of theocracy. Of course, that was excluding the divine master. Iron Bull glanced at the man and woman in the distance. Both of them had a calm aura, and there was no hint of an expert's aura at all. They gave him the feeling that they were just ordinary people. Iron Bull withdrew his gaze and looked at Lin Xiaobai. Let's begin. Lin Xiaobai nodded. In the next instant his figure suddenly disappeared. Not far away, Iron Bull punched out. Boom. This punch caused the surrounding space to tremble violently, and Lin Xiaobai instantly returned to his original position. The moment his feet touched the ground, the entire ground exploded. What power! Somewhere on a mountain, Xian looked at Iron Bull in shock. This Iron Bull's strength was too strong. Below, Lin Xiaobai glanced at Iron Bull and smiled. That's more like it. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared. Not far away, Iron Bull punched out. Simple and direct. Rumble. The surrounding space trembled and a figure directly retreated. This time it was Iron Bull. Very quickly, numerous afterimages suddenly appeared around Iron Bull. At the same time, a powerful force pressed down on Iron Bull like a torrential storm. Iron Bull retreated again and again. Seeing this scene, the faces of the people on the city wall sank. In the void, Spiritual Master Chu was expressionless, and no one could tell whether he was happy or angry. Somewhere on a mountain, Xian looked at Iron Bull and Lin Xiaobai below and said softly, Miss Zhao, who do you think has a higher chance of winning? Zhao Mu looked down and didn't speak. Xian looked at Zhao Mu and said, Miss Zhao, I think you're definitely stronger than Lin Xiaobai. Zhao Mu glanced at Xian and lightly drew a line in front of her with her finger. A small annoyance word appeared in front of Xian, and then she walked to the other side. Xian hurriedly followed. Miss Zhao, it's so boring to watch alone. I'll watch with you. Zhao Mu was speechless. At this moment, an explosion suddenly sounded from below the city wall, and then a figure retreated rapidly. This person was Lin Xiaobai. As Lin Xiaobai was retreating, Iron Bull suddenly roared. In the next moment he stomped his right foot and pounced forward like a wild beast. Not far away, Lin Xiaobai frowned slightly. He clenched his right hand and the space in front of him instantly overlapped. At this moment Iron Bull arrived. Rumble. The space in front of Lin Xiaobai trembled. There was a moment of silence. Bang. The space in front of Lin Xiaobai instantly exploded apart, and a powerful force instantly blasted Lin Xiaobai over 1 kilometer away. As soon as he stopped moving, Iron Bull suddenly appeared in front of him, and then Iron Bull smashed his fist towards his face. The powerful force directly tore space apart. Lin Xiaobai's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he placed his palms together and pushed them forward. Rumble. Lin Xiaobai was instantly blasted 300 m away. He just landed on the ground when his arms shattered, and a wisp of blood flowed slowly from the corner of his mouth. Countless people on the walls of the Great Wall suddenly cheered when they witnessed this scene. Meanwhile, Nangongwan, who stood by the divine leader's side, spoke softly. This person possesses the divine strength of a heavenly god. He's a good seedling. Unfortunately, he didn't make good use of his divine strength. Otherwise, he would be able to enter the top 5 of the divine martial rankings. Meanwhile, the dark-clothed man by the divine leader's side spoke abruptly. Your Majesty, allow me. The divine leader shook his head. He isn't qualified. As soon as she finished speaking, a young man suddenly appeared before Iron Bull. The young man glanced at Iron Bull, Divine Martial Rankings 5th Lin Huan. Iron Bull slowly clenched his right fist. Iron Bull. Lin Huan nodded lightly, and in the next moment he suddenly disappeared. In an instant the surrounding space began to crack. Seeing this scene, Daoist Master Chu's face suddenly changed. Peak of the Dao Mastery Realm. Iron Bull's expression also turned solemn at this moment. He didn't dare to be careless, and he stomped his right foot and punched out. The punch was like a volcanic eruption. Boom. In an instant the space around Iron Bull directly shattered, turning pitch black. In that pitch black space a series of explosions rang out continuously, and the space that had just recovered shattered once again. Just like that, about 15 minutes later the space returned to normal, and at this moment a figure flew out. It was Iron Bull. Seeing this scene, the faces of everyone on the city wall sank. Under everyone's gaze, Iron Bull smashed into the city wall, and the entire city wall trembled. At this moment a figure flashed past. Iron Bull, who was on the ground, leaped up and roared furiously, raising his arms to block. At this moment Lin Huan kicked Iron Bull's arms. Bang! The surrounding space trembled violently, and Iron Bull directly smashed into the city wall. The entire city wall instantly cracked, and blood flowed out of the corner of Iron Bull's mouth. At this moment, Lin Huan suddenly slammed his palm down. Iron Bull's pupils constricted. He couldn't take this palm. However, Lin Huan's hand stopped an inch away from Iron Bull's head. Lin Huan retreated a few meters and he glanced at Iron Bull, whose body had already cracked. You lost. Iron Bull wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. I lost. Why didn't you kill me? Lin Huan said indifferently, because you didn't kill brother Lin Xiaobai just now. If Iron Bull had killed him just now, Lin Xiaobai wouldn't have survived. After a moment of silence, Iron Bull retreated to the side, and he raised his head to look at Perfected Master Chu in the sky. Master, Perfected Master Chu said, you've done well enough. Go and treat your injuries. Iron Bull nodded, then turned and left. Not far away, Lin Huan raised his head to look at the people on the city wall. Show me something powerful. Show me something powerful. Hearing Lin Huan's words, the expressions of the people on the city wall turned extremely ugly. At this moment, a woman suddenly appeared in front of Lin Huan. This person was Zhao Mu. Seeing Zhao Mu, Lin Huan nodded slightly. Make your move. Zhao Mu slowly closed her eyes. Lin Huan squinted his eyes and he slowly clenched his fists. At this moment, Zhao Mu suddenly opened her eyes, and in the next moment her body turned illusory and everyone could see her soul. In the blink of an eye, Zhao Mu suddenly charged forward and punched out. When the punch was thrown, there was no movement at all. However, the expressions of the people on the scene instantly changed. Not far away, the woman behind the Divine Master suddenly said softly, returning to one's natural state. Transcendent Martial Saint Peak. Interesting. The man smiled faintly, but he didn't say anything. The Divine Master closed his eyes and he didn't even look. In front of Zhao Mu, Lin Huan's expression instantly changed. He clenched his fists and a powerful aura suddenly gathered in his body. In the next moment he punched forward. At this moment, Zhao Mu's punch arrived. Boom. Under everyone's gaze, Lin Huan instantly retreated a few hundred meters. As soon as he stopped, Lin Huan's body cracked and blood splattered. On the other hand, Zhao Mu's face was a little pale. That attack just now was her full strength. Not far away, Lin Huan wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and he looked at Zhao Mu, Transcendent Martial Saint. I've lost. At this moment, the woman behind the Divine Master with the flute suddenly appeared in front of Zhao Mu. Seeing this woman, the Southern Sex Martial Master in the void instantly turned solemn. The flute woman glanced at Zhao Mu. Heal. Zhao Mu's attack had consumed too much of her energy, and she was currently not in her peak condition. However, Zhao Mu shook her head and she was about to make a move. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of Zhao Mu, and Yi Xian said in a deep voice, she asked you to heal, so you healed. Why are you acting tough? Zhao Mu glared at Yi Xian as if to ask why you're here again. Yi Xian turned to look at the flute woman and smiled, I'll bring her to heal now. After that he turned around and pulled Zhao Mu away. Zhao Mu was about to resist, but Yi Xian's voice rang out in her mind, If you don't heal, you won't stand a chance against her. Zhao Mu raised her fist and walked towards the flute woman. Yi Xian sighed in a low voice. Go and treat your injuries. I will fight this battle for you. Zhao Mu looked at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian walked towards the flute woman. I'll fight with you. The flute woman glanced at Yi Xian. You're Yi Xian? Yi Xian's heart leaped. You've heard of me? The flute woman nodded. Yi Xian laughed. Who would have thought that I, Yi Xian, would be so famous in your god kingdom? The flute woman continued. The information says that you have no bottom line, and that you're shameless and shameless. You don't seem like a swordsman but more like a despicable cultivator. Is that true? Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 6:15. Yi Xian's face instantly darkened when he heard the flute woman's words. Despicable cultivator? Who's trying to ruin my reputation? Meanwhile, the flute woman suddenly said, Make your move. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he said, I have an idea. The flute woman glanced at Yi Xian. What idea? Yi Xian said, You're a genius and I'm a dragon among men. If we fight like this, I'm afraid we won't be able to decide the victor without fighting for 3 days and 3 nights. So I suggest that each of us attack once without dodging, and the one who retreats the furthest loses. How about it? The flute woman looked at Yi Xian and was about to speak when an angry voice suddenly resounded nearby. Don't believe him. A familiar voice. Yi Xian and the flute woman turned around and saw a woman glaring angrily at Yi Xian. It was the saber-sex Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian glared angrily at Yi Xian. You're a liar. Yi Xian said with a serious expression, Don't talk nonsense. I'm an honest man. Zhou Xian spat fiercely on the ground. Don't insult an honest man. Yi Xian was speechless. Zhou Xian looked at the flute woman. Big sister Nan Yin, you mustn't believe this man. He's very bad. The woman called Nan Yin smiled. Is he very bad? Zhou Xian nodded. Very, very bad. He knows a spatial technique and he doesn't even need to make a move to teleport you away. Nan Yin turned to look at Yi Xian. Is that so? Yi Xian was about to speak when Nan Yin suddenly said, Take this move. If you can take it, you won't die. Take this move. Yi Xian looked at Nan Yin. Do you look down on me that much? Nan Yin smiled and said, If you accept it, it means you think highly of him. If you don't, it means you look down on him. Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, Zhou Xian suddenly said, Sister Nan Yin, he has a sword, a very, very powerful sword, the kind that surpasses the Dao realm. If he uses that sword, there's a slight chance that he can take one of your attacks. But... At this point she looked at Yi Xian. But as a peer you definitely won't use that sword, right? Yi Xian said calmly, I know how to use it. Zhou Xian looked at Yi Xian. I've underestimated how thick your skin is. Yi Xian ignored the little girl and looked at Nan Yin. Miss Nan Yin, there's no need to say anything. Let's exchange a blow and decide the winner in one move. How about it? Nan Yin nodded slightly. Sure. Yi Xian opened his palm and a sword appeared in his hand. Executing Heaven's sword. He didn't dare to be careless facing this woman, because this woman gave him a dangerous feeling, even more dangerous than the Star Lord. If he hadn't become a transcendent sword sage, he wouldn't have dared to be careless. Yi Xian wasn't the only genius in the world. Never underestimate anyone. When Yi Xian took out the sword, not far away the divine nation's master, who had been keeping her eyes closed, suddenly opened her eyes. Her gaze fell on the executing heaven sword in Yi Xian's hand, and the sword at her waist was trembling slightly. The master god placed his left hand on the sword and said softly, Do you recognize this sword? The sword trembled. The master god looked at Yi Xian calmly. In the distance, in front of Yi Xian, Nan Yin's gaze also fell on the sword in Yi Xian's hand. There was a hint of curiosity in her eyes as she looked at the sword. Good sword. Teep. Yi Xian's face darkened. Why are you scolding me? Nan Yin was speechless. At this moment Yi Xian said calmly, Miss Nan Yin, let's begin. As soon as he said that, he gripped the sword tightly in his right hand. Endless earth force began to gather at his feet. In front of Yi Xian, Nan Yin held the flute tightly in her left hand. In the next second the space around her suddenly became illusory. At this moment she seemed to have left the world. Upon seeing this scene, the Southern Sect martial master's expression sank. Half-step Heavenly Dao Realm. Half-step Tendo. He, the Star Lord, and the others were all Tendo, but Nan was a half-step Tendo. Half-step Tendo wasn't scary. What was scary was that Nan looked like she was only in her 20s. A 20-year-old half-step Tendo. She was no worse than Gu Tatian from the Lawful Order Alliance. Back then, Gu Tatian had only reached the half-step Dao mastering state at the age of 21. In the void, the Star Lord and the others were looking down at Nan. At this moment, endless earth force had gathered around Zhou Xian. At this moment he felt like he was the master of the earth. As long as he stood on the ground he would have endless power. At this moment Zhou Xian looked at Nan. Come. As soon as he said that he suddenly disappeared. Zoosh. A ray of earthy yellow sword light flashed across the field. Opposite Zhou Xian, Nan slowly closed her eyes. In the next moment the space around her began to burn. At this moment Zhou Xian slashed down with his sword. Buzz. The sound of a sword reverberated in the sky. How terrifying was the power of the great Dao Law combined with the executing heaven sword. As Zhou Xian slashed down with his sword, the space within thousands of feet cracked into a spider web. It was extremely frightening. At this moment the space around Zhou Xian and Nan was directly destroyed by a mysterious power. It was as if it had been directly erased, and it was not a simple shattering of space. However, at this moment the erased space returned to its original state, and the power of Zhou Xian's sword was still there. Boom. Under everyone's gaze, Nan, who was in front of Zhou Xian, suddenly retreated hundreds of feet. He went. In the field, everyone looked at the nearby Zhou Xian and Nan. Nan looked at Zhou Xian, who was in the distance. You can repair space. Zhou Xian nodded. Nan asked, how did you do it? Zhou Xian grinned. I'm not telling you. With that he turned and left. The moment he turned around his expression became extremely solemn. In that instant that woman had almost taken his life. Because the mysterious power that she had used to burn space had even burned his earth force and earth vein force. If he had been hit by that power he would have died without a doubt. Fortunately he had been prepared to use the Space Dao Law at all times. If the Space Dao Law had not immediately repaired the space and caused that power to disappear he would have died without a doubt. Fortunately he had not underestimated his opponent. Nearby Nan frowned slightly. She was about to speak when a voice suddenly sounded in her mind. That's the Dao Law, the Major Dao Law and the Space Dao Law. He used the Space Dao Law to repair the space. If you had used other powers you would have won. Nan fell silent. The person who spoke was her master, a Tendo expert. At this moment the voice sounded again. Don't feel indignant. People can win but they also have to be able to lose. A win is a win, a loss is a loss. Nan bowed slightly to the sky. Disciple understands. With that she looked at Zhou Xian in the distance. I've lost. With that she turned and left. Nearby Zhou Xian stopped in his tracks. He sighed softly in his heart. Some people were indeed so outstanding that he could not help but admire them. At this moment Xiaomu walked up to Zhou Xian. A trace of blood slowly flowed from the corner of Zhou Xian's mouth. He grabbed Xiaomu's arm. I'm injured. It hurts. Quick, help me up. As he spoke he conveniently leaned on Xiaomu's body. Xiaomu frowned slightly. She was about to make a move when another trace of blood flowed from the corner of Zhou Xian's mouth. Not only that but his face had also become abnormally pale. The consumption was too great. Previously he had used two types of Dao laws and the executing heaven sword. In addition he had forcefully resisted Nan Yin's power. Therefore he had suffered a huge backlash. After hesitating for a while, Xiaomu did not make a move in the end. In the end she left with Zhou Xian. As for Zhou Xian he had placed his hand on Xiaomu's waist. The warmth and fragrance of a woman in his arms were better than countless things in the world. In the void the astral master looked down at Zhou Xian. His expression was calm but in the depths of his eyes, there was a cold murderous intent. Zhou Xian was much stronger than before. At this moment the Southern Sect's martial master suddenly said, Astral Master, you have to figure out who our biggest enemy is right now. The Astral Master looked at the Southern Sect's martial master. The latter looked straight at him. If you still don't know the severity of the situation, that old man will not care about anything anymore. Siding with Zhou Xian. This time the Southern Sect's martial master was clearly siding with Zhou Xian. Among the Southern Sect's martial master, the Astral Master admired Zhou Xian quite a bit. Especially just now, if Xiao Mu, whose vitality was greatly injured, was allowed to fight against Nan Yin, Xiao Mu would most likely die. And Yi Xian suddenly came out to help. Obviously he wanted to protect Xiao Mu. Thinking of this, the Southern Sect's martial master looked at the Astral Master again. Astral Master, the old man doesn't want to care about your grudge with him. However, the most important thing now is to fight against the God race. If you dare to act recklessly, the old man will not be polite. The Astral Master squinted his eyes. His expression was unfriendly. At this moment, Spiritual Master Chu suddenly said, "The two of you should not fight at this time." As he spoke, he looked down at the God Race's army. The God Race's army is still here. Isn't having an internal conflict courting death? As for that Yi Xian, don't bother about him for now. After this matter is over, we will deal with him. Hearing this, the Astral Master retracted his gaze and slowly closed his eyes. The Southern Sect's martial master also retracted his gaze. Below, after Yi Xian defeated Nan Yin, both sides strangely quietened down. Everyone was looking at the God Master of the God Race not far away. As for the God Race's side, they were also waiting for the God Master's orders. Whether it was a duel or a battle, it all depended on the God Master's decision. That's it. Suddenly, a voice resounded from afar. After that, a man walked over slowly from afar. The man had a blade of grass in his mouth and he seemed quite sloppy. Seventh Young Master Tang. Tang Yen looked down at Seventh Young Master Tang, and a wisp of a smile appeared on his face. This fellow. Seventh Young Master Tang. Someone cried out in surprise. Obviously someone had recognized him. Under the gazes of everyone, Seventh Young Master Tang arrived before the God Master and the others. He gazed at the little girl and smiled. "I'm not interested in anyone else, so I'll fight you. What do you think?" The little girl pointed at the Great Wall. Seventh Young Master Tang turned around and looked at the Great Wall. In the next moment, the little girl drew her sword and slashed, and a ray of light flashed. Bang! Before everyone's eyes, the entire Great Wall of 10,000 mountains crumbled in an instant. Not only did the Great Wall of 10,000 mountains crumble, even the mountain that the Great Wall of 10,000 mountains was leaning against was split into two. And that strand of sword chi did not disappear. It pierced through the air, covering a distance of 90,000 miles. Destruction of 10,000 mountains. P.S. I can't update every day for now. Why? Because the day of eruption is coming. I can't help it. I have to save chapters. If I update every day, I won't be able to save chapters. Because it's impossible for me to write 4 chapters, or I'll collapse if I write 4 chapters. This is mental work. I've been updating every day for the last month and I've already taken a lot of kidney treasure tablets, but I can't make up for it. Chapter 6:16. When this divine master drew his sword, the surroundings fell into a deathly silence. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned, especially the 5 Star Lords in the void. At this moment, the 5 of them had an unprecedented solemn expression on their faces. None of the 5 of them might be able to withstand the power of that sword. And the person who had unleashed this sword strike was actually a little girl. Divine Master. Everyone in the surroundings was looking at the little girl. How monstrous was she? Somewhere Yi Xian also had a solemn expression. That sword just now, he could not do it. It was not impossible. If he used all his trump cards such as Bloodline Power, Great Dao Law, Space Dao Law and All Heaven Sword, he could do it. However, that little girl had just casually attacked with her sword. Very casually. Yi Xian was a little confused. Before this, he felt that he should be one of the best among the younger generation of swordsmen. However, there was someone even more monstrous. At this moment, Zhao Mu, who was next to him, suddenly glanced at him. Yi Xian leaned on Zhao Mu. "My young heart has been hurt. Please comfort me." Zhao Mu was speechless. The 7th Tang was silent in front of the little girl. There was no smile on his face anymore. If that sword had been aimed at him, it was likely that he would have been killed instantly. The little girl turned to look at the black-robed man next to her. The black-robed man bowed slightly and then walked in front of the 7th Tang. God Nation, second on the God list. Myun Jun, second on the God list. 7th Tang looked at the black-robed man and said with a smile, "Please enlighten me." As soon as he said that, their eyes met. The next moment, rumble. Under everyone's gazes, the space around them collapsed and shattered. and a series of explosions resounded incessantly from within the pitch-black spatial hole. The little girl suddenly said, "How are the arrangements?" Nangongwan bowed slightly. "Everything has been arranged. After entering the other 3 deserted worlds, our people will immediately take over everything." The little girl nodded. "Only kill the warriors who resist." Nangongwan nodded. "Understood." Right at this moment the space in front of the little girl returned to normal. At this moment Tang Qi and Muyunjun faced each other from afar. Tang Qi's expression was solemn, while Muyunji's expression was still calm. Tang Qi looked at Muyunjun and said, "Decide the winner with one move?" Muyunjun nodded. "Sure." Tang Qi grinned and his body suddenly rose into the air. The next moment the surrounding space began to boil like a boiling book, and a powerful force gathered towards him from the heavens and the earth. In the void, there was a hint of surprise in Spiritual Master Chu's eyes. "Power of heaven and earth." As he spoke, he glanced at Tang Yen, who was not far away. "Congratulations." Mastering the power of the heavens and the earth was equivalent to the half-step Tendo realm. After reaching the half-step Tendo realm, entering the Tendo realm was only a matter of time. It could be said that as long as Tang Qi did not die, the Tang family would have another Tendo expert in the future. Tang Yen did not reply to perfected Master Chu. He kept looking down with a solemn expression. 7th Tang was indeed a monster. However, was Muyunjun, who came from the God Nation, weak? The 2 geniuses did not hold back their attacks. They might decide the winner, but they might also decide life and death. Below, the power around 7th Tang was getting stronger and stronger, but Muyunjun still did not move. He was very calm. At this moment 7th Tang's palm suddenly fell. As the palm fell, it was as if the sky had collapsed, and a destructive force swept towards Muyunjun, power of the heavens and the earth. Facing this destructive palm, Muyunjun's expression was still calm. When the force reached the top of his head, he suddenly opened his palm and clenched it. Boom! Under everyone's gaze, the space around Muyunjun began to turn illusory, and the moment 7th Tang's power fell, it strangely disappeared. In the void, the faces of the Star Lord and the others became extremely ugly. It was unsightly. Tang Yan's eyes were extremely solemn and he hurriedly shouted, "Concede! Concede!" Below, Muyunjun suddenly disappeared. In an instant, rumble. Before the crowd could react, 7th Tang was sent flying. 7th Tang landed heavily on the ground, and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He wiped the blood away and stared at Muyunjun in the distance. Tendo realm. This Muyunjun was not a half-step Tendo realm but a Tendo realm. Muyunjun glanced at 7th Tang and then retreated behind the little girl. The little girl looked up at the Star Lord in the void. Surrender? Obviously she did not want to waste any more time. Because everything was ready. In the void, the Star Lord looked coldly at the little girl. "Show me what you've got." The little girl nodded. "As you wish." As soon as she finished speaking, the 3,000 paladins behind her suddenly charged forward. The 3,000 paladins charged together and the earth began to tremble. At this moment, in the mountain range of the Great Wall of 10,000 mountains, the mountains suddenly shook and soon, a group of about 2,000 cavalry suddenly charged out. The Tang clan cavalry. The 2,000 Tang clan cavalry charged together and the mountains shook. Their momentum was not inferior to the 3,000 paladins of the God Nation. In the open space, the 2 powerful cavalry clashed in the most violent way. Intense. It had to be said that the 2 cavalry clans were too strong. As soon as the battle began, the sky fell and the earth cracked. And at this moment, dozens of black-clothed men suddenly rushed out from the city. In the next moment they appeared beside the 2 cavalry squads like ghosts. Just as they were about to attack the Divine Kingdom's cavalry, 9 black-clothed men suddenly appeared in front of them. The next moment the heads of the dozens of men in black flew out one after another. In a battle between cavalry, if there were assassins in the dark, it would definitely be fatal. The Star Lord and the others thought of this, and so did the God Nation. Seeing that his assassins were slaughtered, the Star Lord in the void hurriedly said, "Enforcers." As soon as he finished speaking, a group of shadows suddenly rushed out from a mountain on the right. However, before they could leave the mountain, they were blocked by a group of men in black robes. These men in black robes all held broken swords in their hands, and their figures were as elusive as ghosts. Without any nonsense, the 2 sides directly started fighting. In the void, the faces of the Star Lord and the others were extremely ugly. Obviously, the god race was prepared. The Star Lord and the others looked at the Demon King, and the Demon King nodded slightly. The next moment, in the depths of the mountain, the earth and the mountains began to tremble violently. Soon, roars suddenly sounded from the mountain range. The demon race army. And at this moment, a giant golden dragon suddenly flew down from the void. In the next moment, it directly appeared in front of the demon race army, and a wave of dragons might forced all the demon race experts to stop. Seeing this scene, the Demon King's face suddenly darkened. In the next moment, he directly shot toward the giant golden dragon. He had to get rid of this giant golden dragon, or all the demon race experts would be directly crippled. However, before he could reach the giant golden dragon, a middle-aged man blocked in front of him. The middle-aged man had a long saber hanging from his waist. The Demon King looked coldly at the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man smiled slightly. Saber sect Xianxia. The Demon King did not say anything and directly shot toward Xianxia. In the distance, Xianxia suddenly drew his saber. A wave of saber light appeared in the sky. In the void, the Star Lord suddenly shouted, "Divine Dao Army." As soon as his voice fell, a group of soldiers riding giant dragons suddenly appeared in the mountains. 3,000 Divine Dao Army, 3,000 giant dragons. Could be said that this was all the giant dragons in this chaotic universe. And in order to prevent the giant golden dragon from suppressing these giant dragons, the Star Lord directly had people take out a large array to fight against the giant golden dragon. It should be said that they could only delay the giant golden dragon. That giant golden dragon's strength was at least in the Tendo realm. Ordinary experts could not stop it at all. After the large array appeared, the giant golden dragon was delayed. At the same time, the 3,000 Divine Dao army directly rushed toward the little girl and the others. At the same time, the 3,000 Divine Dao army directly rushed toward the little girl and the others not far away. The momentum of the 3,000 Divine Dao army and the 3,000 giant dragons directly overshadowed the Tang Clan Iron Cavalry and the Divine Nation Cavalry below. And the target of these 3,000 people was the little girl. At this moment, the 1,000 divine guards behind the little girl suddenly moved. They did not move like a mountain, but when they moved they were like ferocious tigers breaking out of their cages. The 1,000 divine guards directly rushed toward the group of Divine Dao army. How terrifying was it when 1,000 Dao verification experts charged in unison. After the divine guards charged out, the little girl gently pressed her right hand forward, and the 9 armies behind her suddenly pressed down toward the Great Wall. 90,000 soldiers pressed down in unison, and just the pressure they emanated was enough to make many experts on the Great Wall gasp for breath. Countless experts on the Great Wall had extremely solemn expressions on their faces, and some had even started to retreat. No one wanted to lose their lives here. However, those experts who were about to retreat were directly killed by some men in black. The law enforcers. Meanwhile, the Star Lord's voice resounded in the sky. Anyone who dares to retreat will be killed without mercy. The law enforcers were right behind them. No one dared to retreat anymore. Meanwhile, the Star Lord suddenly said, "If we win, all of you can freely plunder for 3 days after entering the Divine Nation. All the wealth in the Divine Nation will belong to all of you." Well, the eyes of many experts instantly burned with desire when they heard the Star Lord. Suddenly, someone shouted, "Charge!" Soon, countless experts charged toward the Divine Nation's army. Not far away, the little girl turned to look at Nangong Wan, and the latter bowed slightly. She waved her right hand and a long flag suddenly shot into the sky. After a moment of silence, countless experts suddenly appeared in the distant sky. These experts were all from various clans and sections. There were many of them and they were very, very strong. The moment they saw these experts, the expressions of the Star Lord and the others in the sky instantly became extremely ugly. If there was a slight chance of victory just now, then the Divine Nation's strength had completely crushed them now. It was a complete and utter suppression. The Star Lord and the others looked at each other, and finally the Star Lord said in a deep voice, "If we don't use our trump cards, we can only wait for death. To catch bandits, we must first capture their leader. Kill that little girl first." As he spoke, he looked at everyone. "Who will go first?" Tang Yen suddenly said, "Let my Tang clan go first." As the sound of his voice faded, he opened his palm and a lotus flower suddenly appeared. In the next moment this lotus flower floated into the air, and as it did so, it grew rapidly against the wind. Soon, under the gazes of everyone present, a white light suddenly appeared above the lotus flower, and within the white light stood a woman in white. Munanji, the most outstanding clan leader in the history of the Tang clan. Below, the little girl looked up at the woman, her face expressionless. And behind her, the two old men holding swords had a rare solemn expression. Not only that, the two of them even stood in front of the little girl from behind. The little girl gently waved her right hand, and the two old men hesitated for a moment, then retreated behind her. Above the lotus, Munanji's eyes gradually became clear. She looked around and finally her gaze fell on the little girl below. The little girl did not show any weakness and looked at Munanji directly. Munanji sized up the little girl and there was a trace of surprise in her eyes. Natural sword Dao's spiritual body, As her voice fell, she pinched her fingers and very quickly, the space above the little girl suddenly became illusory, and soon an image appeared above the little girl's head. It was a gray world, and a woman in a plain dress stood in the clouds, looking down with an indifferent expression. Below, countless people looked at the woman in the clouds, and their eyes were filled with despair. And opposite the woman in the plain dress, there was a swordsman in a green robe and a swordsman in a white robe. At this moment the image suddenly trembled and became more and more blurry. Suddenly, the woman in the plain dress in the clouds suddenly swung her sword, and in the next moment, the sword directly pierced through the woman's forehead, and she slowly fell from the sky. The image suddenly stopped. Munanji looked at the little girl. That was your previous life. Chapter 617. Past Life. The little girl looked at Munanji in the sky. What does my past life have to do with me? Munanji smiled. That may be so, but your past life was not simple. The little girl looked straight at Munanji. I am who I am. No karma can affect me. Munanji looked at the little girl. Some karma is yours to begin with. No one can force it on you. The little girl was expressionless. Why say so much? Come and fight. Munanji did not get angry at the little girl's aggressiveness. She smiled. You want to unify the Chaos Verse? The little girl looked straight at Munanji. The Chaos Verse is always at war. If I unify it, the world will be at peace. Munanji smiled. Then do you know that the world is divided for a long time and united for a long time? Even if you unify the Chaos Verse now, it will still return to war in the future. The little girl was expressionless. Let's not talk about the future. Let's do what we do now. Munanji was about to speak when she suddenly turned to look at Zhou Xian, who was standing on the broken city wall not far away. Zhou Xian was in the middle of treating his injuries. As if sensing Munanji's gaze, Zhou Xian looked up at her. Munanji sized up Zhou Xian. Her eyes flashed with surprise. The next moment she pinched her fingers together. Soon the space above Zhou Xian suddenly trembled. Zhou Xian suddenly asked, "Do you want to read my fortune?" Munanji stopped and looked at Zhou Xian. Can I? Zhou Xian thought for a moment and nodded. Fine. I also want to see what kind of person I was in my past life. Munanji smiled. Her fingers began to move quickly. Soon, a mysterious power appeared in the surroundings. This power was something Zhou Xian had never seen before. At this moment an image suddenly appeared above Zhou Xian's head. Zhou Xian looked up curiously. However, at this moment, dark clouds suddenly gathered in the sky, and an extremely terrifying pressure came crashing down from the sky. Seeing this, Munanji frowned. She looked up. How dare you interfere in my affairs? Suddenly, her expression changed. It's not Tendo. As if she had thought of something, she suddenly stopped and looked at Zhou Xian. There's something that doesn't want me to read your fortune. Zhou Xian said in a deep voice. Who is it? So domineering. Munanji shook his head. I don't know, but he should be very strong. Zhou Xian said, You're so powerful, can you forcibly calculate it? Munanji thought for a moment, then nodded. I'll give it a try. As soon as she finished speaking, she waved her right hand and a wave of energy shot into the sky. In the next moment, the pressure in the sky was instantly erased. Munanji continued. Soon a screen appeared above Zhou Xian's head. This time the image was clearer. In the image was a mountain range, and in the sky, countless demon beasts were wreaking havoc. At this time, Munanji suddenly raised his head. In the next moment, A mysterious energy suddenly appeared above Yi Xian's head. Boom. The image above Yi Xian's head instantly disappeared without a trace. Yi Xian, Mu Nanji's face sank slightly. Yi Xian looked at Mu Nanji. Can it still be read? Mu Nanji shook her head. If my main body was here I could try. Unfortunately this is a clone. Saying this he looked at Yi Xian. Someone is hiding your fortune. It's very strong. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. Who is helping me hide it? Mu Nanji smiled. I don't know about that. Saying this she turned to look at Tang Yen and the others. Tang Yen quickly bowed respectfully. Greetings, ancestor. Mu Nanji smiled. I left this clone here in the hope that when the Tang clan is in danger I will see if I can save it. If you let me out now the Tang clan will have no trump card in the future. Tang Yen said in a deep voice. The invasion of God Nation is the most dangerous moment for the Tang clan. Mu Nanji nodded slightly and then she looked at the little girl below. At this moment, a white-haired old man suddenly appeared in front of Mu Nanji. The white-haired old man looked at Mu Nanji. Please enlighten me. Looking at the white-haired old man, Mu Nanji's eyes flashed with surprise. Emperor Realm. Emperor Realm. Hearing Mu Nanji's words, everyone present was shocked, especially the Star Lord and the others. They hadn't expected that there would be an Emperor Realm expert in God Nation. Mu Nanji smiled. Emperor Realm, interesting. As soon as she finished speaking she raised her hand and slapped. Not far away the white-haired old man suddenly disappeared. Boom. Under everyone's gaze the white-haired old man instantly retreated. This time he retreated more than 1,000 zhang. As soon as he stopped, a powerful force suddenly swept towards him. The white-haired old man's pupils suddenly shrank. He suddenly put his palms together and the space around him suddenly swelled up. He was forcefully pushed up by his powerful strength. In the next moment he suddenly punched forward. He didn't use any martial arts, just a simple punch. This punch directly formed a strange vortex in the space in front of him. At this moment Mu Nanji arrived. Bang! Everyone watched as the space in front of the white-haired old man exploded, and a powerful force swept towards the surroundings. In an instant, the powerful force caused the space in an area of a few tens of thousands of kilometers to ripple. At this moment the white-haired old man had retreated more than 3 kilometers. Moreover his body had completely shattered. The white-haired old man who was in soul form looked towards the distance where Mu Nanji was walking slowly towards him. Tang Yen and the others instantly heaved sighs of relief when they saw this scene. At this time the 2 old men behind the little girl suddenly appeared in front of Mu Nanji. Looking at Mu Nanji the 2 old men suddenly drew their swords. 2 sword howls resounded in the sky, and then 2 rays of light flashed through the sky and slashed towards Mu Nanji. 2 Emperor Realm experts. The Star Lord and the others' faces instantly turned extremely unsightly when they saw the 2 old men attack. Not only were they Emperor Realm experts, but they were also peak extraordinary sword saints. It could be said that they were much stronger than the white-haired old man from before. In the sky, Mu Nanji's face was expressionless as she pointed forward lightly. Split. As soon as she spoke, the 2 rays of light actually split bit by bit until they turned into nothingness. The 2 old men's faces instantly sank when they saw this. Mu Nanji was about to attack again when she suddenly frowned. Because she noticed that her body was becoming more and more illusory. At this moment she recalled that she was only a clone and she couldn't consume too much energy. Tang Yen and the others noticed this as well, and their faces turned extremely unsightly. If Mu Nanji disappeared, then who could resist the experts of the divine nation? Suddenly Mu Nanji looked down at the little girl. The little girl's face was expressionless. Do you want to kill me? Mu Nanji smiled. No. The little girl glanced at Mu Nanji. Why? Mu Nanji laughed. Because you can't. But I want to see your true strength. As soon as she finished speaking she suddenly shot towards the little girl below under everyone's gazes. Not far away the 2 old men's faces changed drastically. They were about to attack but the little girl stopped them. The little girl looked up at the charging Mu Nanji, and in the next moment she suddenly drew her sword. Buzz. A ray of sword light soared into the sky. Boom. In the sky the sword light instantly shattered, and Mu Nanji was already in front of the little girl. At this moment, all the experts of the divine nation were shocked. However no one dared to move. Because Mu Nanji was too close to the little girl. Mu Nanji looked at the little girl in front of her, but she didn't attack again. Instead she smiled faintly, a genius. As soon as she finished speaking, her body became more and more illusory. Soon Mu Nanji completely disappeared before everyone's eyes. Seeing this scene, the expressions of the Star-Lord and the others in the sky instantly became extremely unsightly. Mu Nanji couldn't kill the ruler of the divine nation. Below, their army was already being crushed by the divine nation. Whether it was the Tang clan's cavalry, the divine Dao army, or the lawful alliance's enforcers, they were all completely suppressed. Moreover, there were countless casualties. At this moment, the little girl suddenly waved her right hand. Kill them all. As soon as she finished speaking, dozens of afterimages suddenly leaped out from the surrounding space. In the next moment, screams resounded incessantly from below. Instant kill. Wherever these afterimages passed, blood splattered everywhere. Seeing this scene, the Star-Lord and the others were horrified. Because even the Tang clan cavalry and the divine Dao army were instantly killed by these afterimages. All of them were instantly killed. They couldn't resist at all. Not only that, but countless experts suddenly appeared in the sky. These were the experts of the clans and sects. Crushed. At this moment, the divine nation had completely crushed the other 3 desolate worlds in terms of both numbers and strength. The little girl slowly walked towards the Great Wall. Screams resounded all around her. On the mountain in the distance, Zhou Xian looked down in silence. At this moment, Zhao Mu was about to make a move. Zhou Xian suddenly said, "What's the point of making a move?" Zhao Mu looked at Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian said softly, "We can't stop them." The divine nation was unstoppable. No one could stop the little girl's footsteps. At this moment in the sky, the Star-Lord suddenly said, "Let me do it." As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm, and a black diagram suddenly flew into the sky. This diagram expanded with the wind, and in an instant, the entire diagram covered the entire sky. The sky instantly darkened. Countless bolts of black lightning flashed within the map. Everyone looked up at the map. Bolts of lightning flashed wildly within the map. Soon the lightning suddenly fell towards the divine nation experts below. The lawful alliance's ultimate treasure, the star map. This map surpassed the Dao realm and was one of the lawful alliance's trump cards. At this moment, the little girl suddenly turned her head. Not far behind her, a golden spear suddenly appeared. The next moment, the spear turned into a beam of golden light that shot into the sky. In front of everyone's eyes, the spear directly pierced the map. Rumble. The sky shook violently and the star map instantly cracked. Seeing this scene, the Star-Lord's expression changed drastically. He quickly put away the star map. The little girl coldly looked at the Star-Lord. "I don't want to see these 5 people in half an hour." As her voice fell, several powerful auras suddenly rushed towards the Star-Lord and the others. Emperor Realm experts. All of them were Emperor Realm experts. In the sky, the Demon King suddenly roared, "Summon the soul of the former king." As his voice fell, countless demonic beasts in the mountains suddenly roared in unison. In the next moment, a beam of light shot into the sky. Within that beam of light, a middle-aged man quietly appeared. Nanming Demon King. Half human, half demon. The most stunning demon king in the history of the demon race. The little girl stopped and looked at Nanming Demon King. At this moment, Nanming Demon King suddenly looked at Zhou Xian, who was not far to his right. To be more precise, he was looking at Zhou Xian's abdomen. Looking at Zhou Xian's abdomen, Nanming Demon King narrowed his eyes. "Such a supreme treasure is actually on you." As his voice fell, a powerful aura suddenly shrouded Zhou Xian. Seeing this, Zhou Xian's expression changed. "Motherf **, is he trying to mess with me?" P.S. Counting with my fingers, there will be a large number of monthly votes today. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.